Hello there, and welcome to the Sleepless Scientist, a quiet place in the cosmos where your thoughts can unwind, and knowledge becomes a soft lullaby for the night. Tonight's journey will take us into something vast and strangely intimate at once. The idea that reality may have more dimensions than we can touch, and that consciousness itself might be woven through them, like a hidden current beneath every wave. But before you settle in and get cozy, I'd love if you could take a moment to like this video and subscribe, only if you truly find these quiet explorations enjoyable. And when you're ready, leave a comment to let me know where in the world you're listening from and what time it is for you right now. It's always such a joy to see all the places we gather from, each in our own little slice of time. Now feel free to dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for a soft background hum, and let's gently begin our journey into the soft geometry of mind, where in theory's 11 dimensions, the whispering membranes of space known as brains and the hidden folds of consciousness all seem to echo one another. You might imagine yourself beneath an open sky, somewhere far from any city. The air is cool, the stars seem to breathe, and each one could be a sun with its own family of worlds, spinning silently in their invisible dance. Somewhere, perhaps, another observer is looking up too, wondering the same thing. How much more there is beyond what we see. And if your mind begins to wander as we drift through these hidden layers of reality, that's perfectly fine. Let it wander. We'll still be here, quietly unfolding the story, together. For centuries, physics has been our poetry of the infinite. Each discovery adds a verse, sometimes precise, sometimes cryptic, always reaching. Isaac Newton described a universe of predictable motion, a clockwork of matter and light. Then Einstein arrived, gently bending that clock into curves of space and time. The universe became supple, dynamic, responsive, like fabric. And now, at the quiet edge of modern theory, physicists speak of an even subtler fabric, one with more than the familiar 3 dimensions of space and one of time. According to what's called M-theory, the universe may have 11 dimensions in total, not just up and down, left and right, forward and back, and time flowing forward, but 7 other directions curled so tightly that we cannot perceive them. If the space around you were magnified billions of times, perhaps you'd find it folded like intricate origami, each crease a possible path that light never takes. But don't worry, we won't get lost in the math. Tonight we'll let the symbols soften into images. You can think of these extra dimensions as tiny hidden hallways branching off from every point in space. Imagine a great mansion, where you've only ever seen the living room and hallway, but behind the wallpaper, there are more corridors sealed and silent. They shape the house, even if you never walk them. M-theory suggests that reality itself might be built in this way, a structure with vast rooms we know and hidden chambers folded too small to visit, yet essential for the melody of everything that exists. Physicists once described the world as made of point-like particles, little dots of energy that had no size. But as equations deepened, the dots began to stretch. They became strings, one-dimensional filaments vibrating in patterns that create the illusion of mass, charge, and force. And then, as the story grew, the strings expanded again, becoming membranes, or brains. Some are like thin sheets, others like bubbles or drums. You and I and everything we can touch might exist upon a 3-dimensional brain floating in a larger space, a vast, silent bulk where other brains drift nearby, invisible but not impossible. If that sounds abstract, picture 2 soap films near each other in a sink. They ripple when one moves, even though the space between them looks empty. In some versions of the theory, the Big Bang, that fierce beginning of light and expansion, might have been the moment 2 such brains brushed together, a cosmic hiss, releasing energy into motion. Whether that image is true or not, it holds a quiet poetry. The idea that creation may be less like an explosion and more like resonance, one surface meeting another, vibrating with possibility. You may wonder what any of this has to do with us sitting here, breathing quietly under our own small sky. But the further we explore these layers of existence, the more the outer and inner worlds begin to rhyme. The brain you carry, that soft lightning of perception, is itself a pattern of resonances, an intricate brain within the bulk of biology. Every thought you have, every memory, is a ripple across billions of tiny membranes, and perhaps, just perhaps, awareness isn't confined to the visible dimension of matter at all. Maybe it moves, faintly, through the folds of something larger, not as magic, but as participation. You are, after all, made of the same geometry that holds galaxies in its curve. It's easy to feel small before such ideas. 11 dimensions sound impossibly grand, far beyond human reach. But consider this. The fact that your mind can imagine them already proves something profound about the nature of consciousness. Within the limits of a three-dimensional creature, there arises the ability to conceive of more, to dream of spaces unseen, to build mental corridors where none appear. That gesture of imagination might be the closest we ever come to touching the hidden dimensions, through thought, not through distance. Let's pause here for a moment. Feel the air on your skin, the subtle hum of the world outside your window. Everything you sense, every vibration of sound, every glint of light, is already a kind of translation from those deeper folds of reality. The warmth of a cup of tea is atoms in motion. The motion is vibration. The vibration is geometry, and geometry is the quiet language of existence itself. You are immersed in it already. The only difference now is that we've turned down the noise enough to notice. From here, the story opens into the idea that these hidden dimensions aren't only a matter of physics, but may also echo within us, in the way the mind dreams, the way memory layers itself, the way intuition sometimes reaches ahead of reason. The universe outside and the consciousness inside might not be strangers after all. Perhaps they are reflections folded across the same invisible seam. As we drift further into the story, we'll begin to explore those folds, not by equations, but by gentle understanding. We'll listen to what both science and ancient wisdom whisper about the many layers of being, and how we might live with that awareness in our daily ordinary world. For now, let the thoughts settle like dust in sunlight. You're not only inside the universe is also inside you. When you hold a map in your hands, it never feels alive. The paper is cold, the lines are fixed, the rivers stand still. Yet that quiet sheet can represent a landscape full of wind, sound, and motion. The map is not the territory. It only points toward it. Science works much the same way. Every theory we create, no matter how beautiful, is a kind of map, an attempt to trace the outlines of something infinitely more fluid and complex than ink or numbers can hold. M-theory, with its talk of 11 dimensions and shimmering membranes, is one such map. Vast, intricate, and still unfinished. In physics, the symbols and equations are like musical notes on a score. They don't contain the music, they only tell us how to find it. When you hear that space-time might curve, you could picture it as a soft fabric under the weight of planets. When you hear of hidden dimensions, you might imagine them as folds in that same fabric, invisible but shaping every vibration. These are metaphors, bridges from the language of mathematics to the language of experience. If we listen carefully, both languages are trying to describe the same mystery, a universe that is not flat and simple, but layered, flexible, and alive with structure. It helps to remember that no one has ever seen a dimension. We sense movement in 3 directions and feel time flowing as a 4th. Everything beyond that is deduction, a way of explaining patterns that would otherwise remain unsolved. The extra 7 directions in M-theory aren't floating somewhere in space. They are thought to be curled up so tightly that even light can't enter them. Imagine a strand of hair. To your eye, it looks like a simple line, but if you could shrink yourself down to the size of an atom, you'd discover its roundness, a whole circle of space hidden within what seemed one-dimensional. The universe might be like that, multiplied many times over, every point containing hidden loops, each loop another path reality could take but rarely does. If the thought feels abstract, try an everyday image. Think of how a guitar string vibrates. You pluck it and you hear a single note. But in truth, the string vibrates in many ways at once. Whole segments, halves, thirds, fifths, creating overtones you don't consciously separate. M-theory suggests that the entire cosmos hums like that string, resonating in more ways than we can hear. Matter, energy, light, and gravity are the harmonics of an immense, unseen instrument. The equations are the sheet music. We are living inside the song. But maps, however precise, can make us forget the feel of wind on our face. That's why philosophy and art have always walked beside science. When Newton described gravity, poets wrote of falling apples as symbols of insight. When Einstein bent space and time, painters began to stretch perspective on their canvases. Each discovery ripples outward, reshaping how we imagine ourselves. M-theory's 11 dimensions might sound impossibly distant, yet the idea it represents, that there is more to reality than meets the eye, has been with humanity since the first stories told around a fire. You can find echoes of this idea in ancient texts that spoke of layered worlds, heavens stacked above, underworlds below, realms between waking and dreaming. Those early cosmologies weren't wrong in spirit. They were poetic sketches of what physicists now explore mathematically. And in psychology, thinkers like Jung and William James spoke of many levels of consciousness, not as geography but as gradients of awareness, from the surface chatter of thought to the deep ocean of intuition. When seen gently, science and symbolism are simply two maps of the same territory, drawn in different inks. Of course, every map carries bias. The cartographer chooses which features to include, which to omit, and where to draw the edges. Physics tends to chart what can be measured. Psychology maps what can be felt. Mysticism sketches what can be intuited. None are wrong, but none are complete. To live wisely, perhaps, is to walk with all three maps folded together, aware of their overlaps and their blind spots. Let's pause for a moment. Imagine standing in a quiet library, the kind where footsteps echo. On one shelf lie textbooks filled with symbols. On another, volumes of dreams and myths. In the corner, instruments hum softly. Telescopes, microscopes, EEGs. Each book, each instrument, is an attempt to translate the same silent reality into human terms. The hum of a brain cell, the hum of a galaxy, the hum of a vibrating string, all parts of the same orchestra. And yet, as with music, the meaning isn't in the notation, but in the listening. If you listen to the night long enough, you start to sense its depth. The wind carries patterns. Distant sounds layer together until they become a texture rather than noise. Understanding the universe may be like that, not a matter of isolating facts, but of relaxing into their harmony. The formulas become less about predicting and more about perceiving, about tuning yourself to a subtler rhythm. That's why the language we use tonight matters. We'll translate ideas like 11 dimensions or integrated information into simple shapes and stories, folded rooms, rippling surfaces, the quiet coherence of a choir. These are not simplifications. They are ways of feeling the idea instead of wrestling it. Science, at its heart, is not a wall of numbers. It's a practice of attention. The same kind of attention you're offering now as you listen, breathing evenly, noticing the world expand just a little around the edges. If we follow the thread a little further, we find that each map, physical, psychological, or spiritual, begins to blur into the next. Equations speak of resonance, mystics speak of vibration, psychologists speak of attunement. They're pointing to a shared intuition, that everything, from thought to matter, participates in patterns of connection. You don't have to choose between them tonight. You can let them overlap like translucent layers of watercolour, forming something richer than any single colour alone. As we drift further into the story, we'll start to explore those patterns more closely, the membranes of space that may underlie all matter, and the way awareness itself might echo their structure. But for now, it's enough to know this. Our words are only instruments, our theories only maps. The territory, whatever it truly is, lies beyond them, vast and silent, waiting to be discovered not by conquering it, but by listening. Imagine holding a sheet of paper in your hand. It seems flat, simple, familiar. You can draw on it, fold it, maybe make a small paper bird. Now imagine that every point on that paper hides another paper, folded inside it, and inside that another still. Each one smaller and smaller, curled so tightly that no eye could see them. That is roughly how physicists picture the hidden dimensions of the universe. To us, space feels three-dimensional. We can move left or right, forward or backward, up or down. Add time, and we have the four dimensions Einstein described. A smooth fabric where gravity bends the flow of everything that moves. But in M theory, this fabric doesn't stop there. Beneath the familiar weave, it folds in 7 additional directions, compacted like a microscopic origami that curls up inside every particle, every photon, every breath of air. These extra dimensions are not elsewhere. They are everywhere. They do not float above the universe like unseen floors of a cosmic building. They are part of the same room, hidden in the grain of the walls. If you could shrink yourself smaller than an atom, smaller than the waves of light that make sight possible, you might discover that the space between what seems empty is coiled into exquisite geometry. Some of these shapes are called Calabi-Yau manifolds, but don't worry about the name. You can imagine them as tiny cathedrals of space, their corridors looping and reconnecting, forming resonant chambers that determine the kind of vibrations that can live inside them. Those vibrations are what we call matter. In Med theory, each kind of particle, electrons, quarks, photons, is a different mode of vibration on a fundamental string or membrane. Just as the tone of a violin string depends on its length and tension, the properties of a particle depend on how the underlying geometry allows it to vibrate. Where the curled dimensions are wide, the notes are deep and heavy. Where they are tight, the notes are high and light. Reality, in this view, is an orchestra of tiny resonances playing across invisible folds. When you strike a key on a piano, you hear not just the fundamental note but a halo of harmonics, faint overtones that give the sound its texture. The universe works the same way. The visible world is the fundamental tone, but behind it hum countless overtones from dimensions we can't access. Every atom, every heartbeat, every star carries the full harmony within it, whether or not we notice. You might wonder how something so elaborate can remain unseen. The answer lies in scale. The curled dimensions are thought to be impossibly small, smaller than anything we could probe even with the most powerful particle accelerators. It's as if you stood on a vast plain and someone told you that every blade of grass hides a spiral staircase. The staircases are real, but your feet will never feel them. Their existence can only be inferred through the echoes they leave in the larger structure. Sometimes physicists try to describe this with numbers so huge they seem abstract. The radius of these folded dimensions might be a trillionth of a millimeter, but for us, it's simpler to think in images. Picture a tight spiral carved into the edge of a seashell. From a distance, the line looks smooth, but under a microscope you'd see it curving in upon itself again and again. The space of our universe could be like that. appearing smooth from afar but coiled with invisible intricacies that shape every particle within it. Now here's where the story takes on a quiet wonder. If the geometry of these hidden folds determines the kinds of vibrations that exist, then in a sense, geometry creates reality. The structure of space itself writes the symphony of matter and energy. You could say that existence is not built from stuff, but from shape, from the way the universe curves, twists, and resonates. This idea blurs the line between physics and poetry. For thousands of years, philosophers have spoken of form giving rise to substance. Plato imagined perfect geometric ideals behind the shadows of the material world. Mystics spoke of sacred patterns shaping creation. Now, modern physics hints at something similar, that the ultimate source of matter might be mathematical pattern itself. Only now, the geometry isn't carved in marble or drawn on parchment. It hums inside the smallest grains of space. But what does that mean for us, walking through our ordinary lives? It means that every simple thing, a cup of coffee, a leaf trembling in the wind, the warmth of your hand, spilt on architecture far beyond our senses, the leaf's green, the coffee's aroma, the pulse in your wrist, all are expressions of folded space singing at scales too small to see. And perhaps, in some deeply connected way, so is consciousness. Because if the universe is a vast orchestra, then awareness might be the listening, the still presence through which the music becomes known. Some physicists and philosophers have speculated that consciousness could arise from how matter organizes itself in this 11-dimensional fabric. Others see it the other way around, that consciousness is fundamental and the fabric of space is how it perceives itself. Either way, the image is beautiful, the mind and the cosmos sharing the same underlying geometry, two reflections in the same curved mirror. Let's pause for a moment and breathe that in. The air you're drawing now has crossed galaxies, has been folded and unfolded by stars that lived and died long before our world was born. The atoms inside you were once vibrations in those hidden spaces, tuned by the shape of the universe itself. You're not outside the geometry, you're part of it. Every thought you have is one of its ripples, every heartbeat a subtle chord in its cosmic song. From here, the story carries us toward another question. If the universe is folded so intricately, could the mind, too, have hidden dimensions of its own? When you dream, when you imagine, when intuition flickers like light through fog, are you, in some way, reaching through the folds? In the next part of our journey, we'll begin to explore that possibility, listening for the quiet rhyme between the geometry of space and the geometry of consciousness. For now, rest in the thought that even the simplest point in space may contain the entire architecture of the cosmos, folded, humming, waiting to be heard. If you've ever stretched a piece of fabric tight over a frame or pressed your palm against a drum, you already know something about how a universe can exist. A brain, spelled B-R-A-N-E, is short for membrane, and in M theory it's imagined as one of those stretched surfaces. Our entire cosmos might be such a sheet, floating in a vast silent expanse called the bulk. To picture it, imagine a soap bubble suspended in air. Everything you can touch, every star and molecule, lies upon that bubble's skin, while the space inside and around it is another, deeper kind of emptiness. In the older picture of physics, the world was made of points, tiny dots of matter moving through space. Then came the idea of strings, one-dimensional threads vibrating like violin strings, giving rise to the variety of particles we see. But strings, it turned out, may be only the smallest hints of something wider. In the expanded theory, these threads can stretch into surfaces or even volumes, like delicate sheets rippling through higher space. Some are two-dimensional, some have more, yet all can vibrate in countless ways. Each pattern of motion corresponds to what we call a field or a particle. But you don't have to imagine equations or coordinates. Think instead of wind moving across a curtain, setting it fluttering in slow waves. The movement itself becomes the music of existence. Our own three-dimensional universe may be one of these membranes, a vast cosmic drumhead tuned so precisely that its vibrations create galaxies, light, and life. The bulk that holds it might be immense, a space with more directions than our minds can visualize. Other brains could drift nearby, each with its own version of physics, its own timeline, perhaps even its own inhabitants, invisible to us because the light of one brain cannot easily cross into another. The distance between these worlds could be thinner than a breath, and yet utterly unreachable, like pages pressed together in a closed book. When physicists describe how brains interact, they sometimes speak of tension and resonance, of the way one surface might influence another through the bulk that surrounds them. To translate that into an image, imagine two drumheads facing each other across a still body of air. If you tap one, the other quivers slightly, echoing the sound. Some cosmological models suggest that the Big Bang itself might have been such a moment. Two brains brushing together, releasing a burst of energy that expanded into everything we now know. The notion is speculative, but it carries a strange elegance. Creation, in this story, wasn't a single explosion, but the vibration of two cosmic membranes finding harmony for an instant. Whether or not that picture is true, it helps us feel the scale and subtlety of what existence could mean. It reminds us that our universe may not be a solid object at all, but a living resonance suspended in a larger silence. The forces that hold it together, gravity, light, electromagnetism, are simply different rhythms played on the same surface. Every atom is a ripple, every thought a finer wave moving through the same unseen fabric. If you sit quietly and listen, you can almost feel it. The air in the room carries tiny pulses from distant sounds, a car passing, a clock ticking, your own breathing. Each vibration blends into the next until the space around you hums with invisible motion. That hum, multiplied beyond comprehension, is what brain theorists imagine filling the cosmos. The emptiness between galaxies is not nothing. It is the stillness between notes. The language of tension and resonance also offers a way to think about consciousness without forcing it into equations. The brain itself is a network of oscillations, electrical waves that rise and fall in patterns. Awareness may arise when those patterns synchronize, much like parts of a drumhead vibrating in unison. The metaphor doesn't prove anything, but it lets us sense continuity between the structure of mind and the structure of the universe. Both are patterns of vibration, tuned to hold meaning. If we follow that thread further, an unexpected comfort appears. To be alive is to participate in this resonance, not to stand apart from it. You're not a spectator of a cosmic performance. You're part of the instrument. When you speak, your voice travels as pressure waves through air. When you think, your neurons exchange faint currents that ripple through your own internal brain. The act of noticing those ripples, that gentle self-awareness, may be the universe listening to itself. Let's take a slow breath together. Imagine the surface of a calm lake at dawn. A single drop falls, and concentric rings spread outward, merging softly with reflections of clouds. Each ring is small, yet together they shape the entire surface. Our actions, our emotions, our attention create similar rings in the field we inhabit. Even the quiet decision to be kind, or to pause before speaking, changes the texture of this shared vibration. You might wonder, if multiple brains can exist, could others be near us right now? Worlds layered beside ours, never touching. Some scientists say yes, at least as a mathematical possibility. Others treat it purely as metaphor. Either way, it stirs something deeply human. The sense that reality is larger than what we see, and that perhaps dreams, intuition, and imagination are ways our awareness grazes the edge of those neighbouring layers. When you feel déjà vu, or a sudden inspiration that seems to arrive from nowhere, you might be hearing a faint echo across the membranes. Not a mystical message, just the natural resonance of a mind embedded in a vast vibrating field. Of course, we must keep humility close. These are ideas at the border of knowledge. M-theory remains unconfirmed, a beautiful map without full territory. But its poetry helps us picture the unseen, and through that picture to sense our place within it. Whether brains truly exist or not, the metaphor holds. The world is a surface of relations, not a pile of isolated things. Connection is not an afterthought of nature, it is the fabric itself. From here, our quiet exploration turns toward the folds inside those membranes, the tiny curled dimensions that give every vibration its unique tone. As we drift deeper, we'll see how shape becomes substance, how geometry writes the music of being. For now, you can rest in the thought that every sound you hear, every heartbeat, every breath is part of the same immense drum still echoing from that first cosmic touch. If you've ever unfolded a paper crane and traced the pattern of creases, you've seen how a flat surface can hold the memory of a shape. The folds tell a hidden story, where the wings once were, how the head turned, where the tail bent toward air. Physicists believe the universe may be built in much the same way. Beneath the apparent smoothness of space, there could be folds so small, so intricate, that they determine everything we see. From the colour of light to the taste of water, to the way gravity pulls at your feet. They call these folded shapes Calabi-Yau manifolds. The name sounds complicated, but you can imagine them as tiny cathedrals of geometry. Within every point in space there might be a structure with corridors curling into themselves, archways looping back like the petals of a flower folded inward. These aren't literal tunnels we could walk through. They are the hidden architecture that guides how the strings and membranes of M-theory vibrate. Every tone needs a body to resonate within, a flute, a violin, a drum. The body's shape decides which notes are possible. In the same way, the shape of these invisible folds decides which vibrations can live inside space itself. Where the corridors of geometry are wide, the resulting note might become a heavy particle. Where they twist tightly, a lighter one might appear. The laws of physics, in this view, are the acoustics of creation. Think of light for a moment, that steady companion arriving through your window or glowing softly from the screen in front of you. Its colour depends on frequency, how quickly its waves rise and fall. In M-theory, those frequencies arise because of how the underlying space allows them to move. If the Calabi-Yau folds had a slightly different pattern, the vibrations would shift and the entire symphony of matter and energy could sound different. A world with a different geometry might not have atoms that bind, stars that shine, or minds that wonder. It's a humbling idea. The reason we exist at all might lie in the way space curled itself billions of years ago. The cosmic equivalent of a paper fold so perfect that life could hum along its edge. You can sense this beauty in small things too. When a guitar maker shapes the body of an instrument, they are sculpting air into possibility. The curve of the wood, the hollow inside, the grain, all decide which harmonies can arise. Space too is an instrument. Its hidden folds are the resonant chamber for everything we call real. And consciousness, that quiet awareness behind your thoughts, might be the listening that makes the music complete. It's easy to imagine the universe as emptiness with occasional decoration. A planet here, a star there, a person somewhere on the edge of a galaxy. But at the deepest level, emptiness itself is richly textured. It is woven with these infinitesimal patterns that determine everything built upon them. Even the calm air in your room is not blank. It's a sea of invisible curves, guiding every particle of dust, every photon of light. The simplicity we experience is just the averaged hush of unimaginable complexity. When mathematicians draw these Calabi-Yau shapes, they look like blossoms of glass or delicate knots of light. But their beauty isn't only visual, it's logical. harmonious, complete. Each fold balances another, each curve ensures that the whole remains stable. This symmetry allows the higher dimensions to compact themselves without tearing space apart. It's as if the universe found a way to fold infinity neatly into a point, tucking excess possibility into graceful corners. You might wonder how we can talk about such shapes if they're far beyond sight. The answer is resonance again. Just as a hidden room changes how sound travels through a house, these curled dimensions leave fingerprints on the vibrations we can observe, the particles we detect in accelerators, the behaviour of forces. They're faint echoes of the geometry beneath. We can't see the room, but we can hear its acoustics. Take a moment to picture it not as machinery, but as art. Imagine the cosmos as a vast origami garden, each particle a petal, each law of nature a crease that holds the petal's shape. Somewhere within that garden, you and I are folded too, our bodies and thoughts patterned by the same mathematics that curves galaxies. We move, we breathe, we think, and each of those acts is a small unfolding of a larger design. The metaphor extends inward as well. Our minds, like space, contain folds and dimensions we rarely explore. There are thoughts within thoughts, memories that curve back into forgotten corners, intuitions that loop from the future into the present. When you dream, you might feel these inner folds opening slightly, spaces where ordinary time and logic soften. In that way, you are a Calabi-Yau structure of consciousness, intricate, self-folded, resonant. If you listen carefully to your own experience, you can feel these curvatures. Notice how one emotion can contain another, joy edged with nostalgia, sadness laced with gratitude. They coexist like overlapping layers of a shape too complex to flatten. Awareness holds them all, the way multidimensional space holds every vibration within its silent frame. Sometimes when people talk about higher dimensions, they picture them as distant realms, unreachable heavens. But perhaps they are as near as the next breath. The way a scent can awaken a forgotten memory, or a chord of music can pull tears from nowhere, suggests that dimensions need not be physical to be real. They can be layers of perception, folded worlds within us that open when touched by the right note. So the phrase Calabi-Yau doesn't have to feel alien or cold. It's just a name for the universe's hidden artistry, the delicate folding that lets existence sound the way it does. In those folds, light becomes colour, matter becomes form, and maybe mind becomes meaning. The physics is complex, yes, but the feeling behind it is simple. The world is composed, not random. It sings because it has structure, and we are part of the song. From here, our journey begins to widen. We've explored the subtle geometry that may underlie matter, but what about the mind that perceives it? If the universe folds itself into hidden dimensions, perhaps consciousness does too, reflecting those patterns inwardly. As we drift further, we'll begin to wonder whether the same shapes that govern the stars also ripple through thought, dream, and memory. For now, take a slow breath, as if you could feel the folds of reality expanding and relaxing with your lungs, an origami universe quietly breathing with you. Close your eyes for a moment and imagine 2 pages of a book pressed together. For the most part, they rest in silence, their surfaces smooth and still. But imagine that for a brief instant the pages ripple, just enough to touch. In that delicate meeting, a spark leaps across, and the stillness becomes light, heat, motion. That, in the language of M-theory, is one possible picture of how our universe began. Not from a single explosion out of nothing, but from the quiet contact of 2 immense membranes in the higher dimensional bulk. The usual way we describe the Big Bang is as an eruption, an infinitely dense point that suddenly expanded into space and time. But this newer story paints it differently. In it, Space and time already existed as part of those brains, folded and floating through a larger invisible ocean. When they brushed together, the energy released was enough to ignite an entire cosmos. Imagine the soft pop of a soap bubble meeting another, sending ripples outward through the liquid around them. The light and matter we now see could be those ripples, still expanding billions of years later. It's a poetic model, though still only a hypothesis. No one can yet verify such a meeting directly. The mathematics remains ahead of measurement. But even as metaphor, it offers something valuable, a gentler sense of creation, not as a violent detonation, but as a resonance between two surfaces. Instead of a shout, the beginning becomes a chord. You might picture those brains as vast sheets of light, stretched across dimensions we can't perceive. Each sheet vibrates with its own rhythm, its own laws of physics. Some versions of the theory imagine that there could be many such brains, drifting like pages in an invisible book, each one a separate universe. Occasionally, through some deep cosmic motion, two might drift close enough to touch. Where they meet, energy flares, time begins anew, and a new universe unfurls. Our Big Bang could have been just one brushstroke in an infinite library of worlds. Think of waves meeting on the surface of a pond. When they collide, they don't destroy each other. They create new patterns, concentric circles that carry information far beyond the point of contact. The ripples of one wave influence the shape of another, forming a lattice of interaction. The early universe may have been such a lattice, a mingling of vibrations from two grand surfaces, setting the stage for everything that would follow. If you've ever watched a drop of ink spread through water, you've seen expansion on a tiny scale. It starts at one point, then diffuses outward until it colours everything. The birth of space could have been like that. Energy expanding through emptiness until emptiness itself became space. Time began as that flow of diffusion, each moment carrying the echo of the first pulse. The temperature then would have been beyond comprehension, yet within that inferno, symmetry ruled. Everything was uniform, smooth, pure vibration. Gradually, as the universe cooled, those vibrations slowed. The energy condensed into particles, the particles into atoms, the atoms into clouds of gas that eventually gave rise to stars. Every atom in your body was once part of that first shimmer, a note in the vast symphony that began when the brains kissed. You're literally made of that moment's resonance. When you breathe, the air filling your lungs carries atoms forged in those early stars, recycled through billions of years of cosmic history. You're not just a witness to creation, you're part of its ongoing rhythm. Some scientists compare this to what they call cosmic inflation, a brief period when space expanded faster than light itself, smoothing out the universe. The brain collision idea doesn't discard that. It simply suggests that the trigger for inflation could have been contact between two higher dimensional worlds. But tonight, let's keep the image gentle. You can think of it as two instruments striking the same note, the resonance growing louder until it fills every corner of the hall. The universe is the echo that hasn't yet faded. When you look up at the night sky, you're seeing that echo stretched thin by time. Every photon that reaches your eyes has been travelling since shortly after the beginning. Even the faint cosmic microwave background, the soft radiation that hums through every patch of space, is the afterglow of that first contact. It's as if the pages of the book are still warm from where they touched. This story has another layer too, one that mirrors our inner lives. In a way, every beginning in human experience resembles that cosmic touch. When two ideas meet, when two people connect, when an insight suddenly forms between thought and feeling, something new ignites. Creativity, love, even awareness itself seem to arise not from isolation, but from contact. The universe expands through relationship, and so do we. There's a quiet lesson hidden in that symmetry. We tend to imagine beginnings as loud, decisive, dramatic. but the most powerful ones are often subtle. The moment you decide to forgive, to listen, to wonder again. Those are small collisions between dimensions of the self, the part that fears and the part that hopes, the part that doubts and the part that trusts. When they meet, something bright is born and your own inner universe expands. Let's pause a moment. Picture yourself as one of those pages floating softly in an invisible sea. Around you lies silence, neither dark nor light, simply potential. Then, in the distance, another page drifts closer. As it nears, you feel a faint vibration, a promise of contact. The moment the edges meet, warmth spreads through your being. You are light, you are motion, you are the universe becoming aware of itself. The ripple continues outward forever. From here, the path carries us toward a quieter question. If the universe began as a gentle resonance, what happens to that rhythm now within us? Does some memory of that original vibration still echo in consciousness? The way a string once plucked continues to hum long after the sound has faded. In the next step of our journey, we'll listen for that echo, exploring why so many people feel a sense of incompleteness, as if some part of themselves remembers more dimensions than the senses reveal. For now, breathe softly and remember, you are still within the sound of that first touch, still rippling outward in time's unfolding page. There's a quiet frustration that runs through human life, the feeling that something is missing, though we can't name what. It comes at unexpected moments, standing by a window as evening light fades, or waking in the middle of the night with the sense that the dream you were having was somehow more real than waking life. It's as if we live in a house with sealed doors, rooms whose shapes we can sense but never enter. Physics might describe that limitation in its own way, not as a flaw, but as a natural result of dimensional confinement. If M theory is right, we inhabit a three-dimensional brain. Our entire physical reality, every mountain, every breath, every heartbeat, lies upon this vast, flexible sheet. The extra dimensions exist, but they are curled so tightly that we can't move through them. To our senses, they simply don't exist. Evolution tuned our eyes, ears and skin to survive in 3 dimensions, not 11. It's the same reason a fish, born in a lake, would never imagine the ocean. It has no need to. We were designed to notice what helps us stay alive, not the invisible fabric beneath it all. And yet, something in us yearns for more. Our imagination constantly pushes at the edges of what's visible. We dream of other worlds, we write about spirits and parallel universes, we build telescopes to peer deeper into the night. This yearning might be more than poetic restlessness. It may be the echo of those hidden dimensions, a faint awareness that we are folded beings living in a folded space. You can feel this confinement even in the simplest moments. Think of how a mirror flattens your reflection. You see your face, but not the warmth behind it. Your eyes, but not the thought inside them. The image lacks depth because it's limited to 2 dimensions. That's how our perception works too. It translates the vast richness of the universe into the narrow picture that fits our senses. We don't see the electromagnetic spectrum, only a sliver of light. We don't hear all frequencies, just the ones that pass through the filter of our biology. The real world may hum with layers of existence that pass right through us, like music we can't quite hear. In this sense, the missing room isn't outside of us, it's within us. Consciousness might stretch further than our physical senses allow, but like a folded letter, most of it remains hidden from view. Mystics across cultures have hinted at this for centuries. They describe the material world as a shadow of something more complete, and the human being as an instrument only partly tuned. Modern physics, curiously enough, seems to rhyme with that intuition. If 11 dimensions are real, then most of reality truly is hidden, compactified beyond our reach. But we don't need equations to understand what that feels like. Imagine looking through a keyhole at a garden. You see a few leaves, a patch of sky, a single flower nodding in the breeze. You could describe it perfectly, measure every visible detail and still miss the larger pattern. The way the air smells after rain, the hum of bees, the expanse of colour just beyond the frame. Our perception of the universe is that keyhole view. The garden is much larger than what we can see, and perhaps consciousness is the sense that something greater is waiting beyond the door. This limitation has a strange grace to it. Because we can't see the whole, we're constantly invited to imagine it. Curiosity becomes our way of touching the unseen. Science itself was born from that impulse, the quiet rebellion against confinement. Every time someone wondered what lay beyond the horizon, or inside the atom, or behind the stars, they were listening to that yearning for the missing room. Curiosity is how the universe looks back at itself through human eyes. Still, there's a gentle paradox here. The same confinement that frustrates us also defines us. Without it, we might dissolve into the vastness we're trying to glimpse. Just as a painting needs a frame, consciousness needs boundaries to perceive anything at all. If we could experience every dimension at once, perhaps everything would blur into white light, indistinguishable, overwhelming. The three-dimensional world is a kind of safety, a quiet room where awareness can focus and learn. The trick, maybe, is not to break the walls, but to sense what they're made of. You can experience that balance in small ways. Close your eyes and listen to the hum of the room around you. There are sounds you normally ignore, the faint buzz of electricity, the whisper of air against a wall. The moment you notice them, the world seems larger, yet still familiar. You haven't left your brain, but you've expanded your awareness within it. Perhaps multi-dimensional living begins not by escaping the physical, but by perceiving more deeply within it. It's the same with emotions. A feeling of sadness, for example, might seem flat and heavy, a single colour filling the frame. But if you stay with it, you often discover that it contains shades of tenderness, gratitude, even love. The moment expands, revealing hidden folds. Emotional awareness, like higher dimensional space, has depth we rarely explore. Each thought, each feeling, might be a doorway to another layer of being. When ancient traditions spoke of enlightenment, they may have been describing an experience of temporarily unfolding these inner dimensions, a sense of connection so vast that the walls of self seem to dissolve. But for daily life, most of us remain wisely folded, moving through the world's simpler geometry. It's how we hold a cup, write a letter, or meet someone's eyes. The art lies in remembering that simplicity does not mean smallness. The infinite can hide comfortably inside the ordinary, just as 11 dimensions can hide inside 3. Sometimes, late at night, when the world grows quiet, you may feel a soft pressure in the mind, not anxiety, but a kind of spacious ache. It's the same pull that made explorers set sail, poets write, and physicists calculate. It's the whisper of the dimensions you cannot see, reminding you that your story is part of something far larger, and yet they're not elsewhere. They're folded right here, inside your breath, your heartbeat, your thoughts. If we follow the thread a little further, the question naturally arises. If these hidden dimensions are real, and we are shaped by them, could awareness itself extend through them? Could consciousness be the bridge between what is folded and what is open? In the next stretch of our journey, we'll begin to explore how scientists and philosophers have tried to measure that mystery, how theories of information, integration, and coherence hint that awareness might be the most fundamental vibration of all. But for now, it's enough to rest in the quiet wonder that even in our confinement, we are vast, creatures of infinite geometry living within a single room of the universe. If you could listen to your own mind the way one listens to a choir, what would you hear? At first, perhaps only scattered voices, the rush of thought, the echo of memory, the hum of emotion weaving through it all. But when attention softens, something extraordinary happens. The noise becomes harmony. You begin to sense that every thought and feeling, every cell and circuit is part of a single unfolding melody, your experience of being alive. Scientists have tried for decades to understand what this melody is made of. Out of that search came a theory with a soft, unassuming name, Integrated Information Theory, or IIT. It doesn't try to define what consciousness feels like, but instead asks a simpler question. What kind of system could have a feeling at all? What makes something more than the sum of its parts? At its heart lies an idea as poetic as it is precise. Consciousness is what happens when information becomes deeply integrated, when the parts of a system know each other so thoroughly that the whole gains a kind of inner coherence. Imagine a small choir again. Each singer practicing alone is just a voice, but when they begin to listen and adjust to one another, the music takes on a life of its own. The sound becomes one thing, not many. The scientist who built this theory gave that sense of unity a symbol, a single Greek letter, phi. But we won't need the letter tonight. You can think of it simply as a measure of how much a system feels itself as one whole. A high level of integration means strong harmony, like a choir perfectly in tune. Low integration means fragmentation, like voices singing different songs in different keys. Your brain, when awake and alert, is a vast choir humming together, exchanging signals across billions of neurons. When you sleep deeply or fall under anesthesia, the choir drifts apart into quiet clusters. The unity fades, and so does the sense of I. It's a gentle and testable way to talk about awareness, not in mystical terms, but as something we can observe. Researchers place tiny sensors on the scalp and deliver a soft magnetic pulse to a region of the brain. They then watch how the signal echoes through the network. When the mind is conscious, the echo dances through many regions, complex and interwoven. When the mind is unconscious, the echo quickly fades, as if the sound found no room to travel. It's as though the architecture of awareness has folded in on itself, waiting for morning to open again. But even this scientific picture, as grounded as it is, invites awe. It tells us that consciousness is not a single spark in one place, but a relationship, a conversation between parts of a system that together make meaning. In that sense, every act of attention, every perception, is an act of connection. The universe, through us, is listening to itself. To make this idea less abstract, think of something ordinary. Your hand resting on a warm cup of tea. The heat against your skin is not just a signal sent upward to the brain, it's part of a vast loop. Millions of nerve endings fire, the brain interprets the pattern, the muscles adjust slightly, the mind registers comfort. Each step depends on the others. Remove any part of the loop and the sensation dissolves. Integration is not an intellectual trick. It's the architecture of every experience. In everyday life, you can feel this difference between scattered and integrated awareness. When you're distracted, rushing between tasks, your inner choir becomes discordant. Thoughts clash, attention fractures, and the sense of self feels thin. But when you slow down, cooking, walking, listening to rain, your mind begins to align. The scattered voices find a common rhythm. You experience a subtle sense of wholeness, a feeling that the world and the self are moving together. That moment is the essence of integration, a lived example of what the theory tries to describe. It's important to remember, though, that IIT doesn't claim to explain everything. It doesn't say why integration should feel like consciousness, only that the two seem to move together. It's a map, not the territory. Some scientists praise its elegance, others criticize it for trying to measure something as mysterious as experience. And that's healthy. Science needs disagreement. It keeps the conversation alive, prevents us from mistaking one melody for the whole symphony. What the theory does offer is a bridge, a way for physics, biology and psychology to speak a common language about awareness. In the same way gravity united the motions of apples and planets, integration offers a way to link brain and mind without losing wonder. It says quietly that consciousness isn't an on-off switch, but a spectrum of coherence. Even simple creatures, perhaps even the cells in your body, participate in small echoes of awareness, tiny choirs singing soft local songs. If that sounds fanciful, remember, every neuron in your brain communicates with thousands of others. The pattern of their exchange, the timing, the rhythm, the connectivity, is what you call a thought. It's the living proof that awareness arises not from isolation, but from relationship. When those relationships break down, as in deep sleep or coma, consciousness recedes. When they reform, it returns. In that way, the boundary between life and mind begins to blur. The whole cosmos could be seen as an enormous web of integration. Galaxies clustering, stars exchanging light, ecosystems balancing flows of energy. At each level, coherence produces something new, a star's radiance, a forest pulse, a human mind's inner song. Let's pause here. Take a slow breath and notice how your attention gathers. The air moves in, fills your lungs, your heart beats in reply, your mind registers the rhythm. Each part, breath, heart, thought, acts as one. You're experiencing integration directly, not as theory, but as being. This wholeness doesn't require belief. It's happening in every moment you are aware. Still, there's humility in knowing that our most advanced equations and instruments can only trace the faint outlines of this mystery. We can measure patterns of complexity, but not the taste of a memory or the colour of longing. The inner dimension of consciousness remains private, unquantifiable, and perhaps sacred. But IIT at least lets us whisper about it, scientifically turning poetry into something the laboratory can almost touch. As we drift further into the story, another question begins to form. If integration describes how parts of a brain harmonize, could the same principle apply to the fabric of the universe itself? Could consciousness be more than the echo of neurons, perhaps a property of reality woven through its structure? The next chapter of our quiet exploration will take us there, into the shimmering borderland where quantum whispers mingle with thought, where some scientists dare to wonder whether awareness might be as fundamental as space or time itself. For now, rest in the simple truth that to be aware is to be connected, and that connection, even in silence, is the universe remembering its own song. If you lean close to silence, you might begin to hear it hum. Not the hum of a machine or the sound of air, but something more delicate, the subtle vibration of the world itself. Physicists tell us that beneath the surface of everything, even the stillest rock or the emptiest space, there is motion, a restless shimmer of energy flickering in and out of existence. That gentle restlessness is the language of the quantum world, a place where reality behaves less like a solid wall and more like a melody made of possibilities. Some thinkers, standing at the crossroads of physics and biology, have wondered whether consciousness might, in some way, be listening to that melody. One such idea is known as the orchestrated objective reduction hypothesis, a name far too heavy for bedtime, so let's simply call it the orchestrated theory. It was proposed by two scientists, Roger Penrose and Stuart Hameroff, who came from different worlds, one a mathematician exploring the deep logic of the universe, the other a doctor fascinated by the strange awakenings of the human mind. Together they asked a daring question. Could the quantum whispers inside our cells play a part in the symphony of awareness? Inside the brain, each neuron is a tiny forest of branches. Within those branches live smaller structures called microtubules, slender tubes that help the cell keep its shape and transport molecules. Hameroff imagined these microtubules as instruments fine enough to host quantum vibrations, patterns of energy that could synchronize, collapse and reform, creating moments of coherence across the brain. Penrose, who had long suspected that consciousness might involve the very foundations of physics, called these collapses objective reductions, instances where a wave of possibilities resolves into a single event. If those collapses happened in unison, perhaps they could create what we experience as a conscious moment. That's a lot to take in, so let's soften the language. Imagine your brain as a concert hall filled with countless tiny violins. Most of the time, they play independently, random notes that cancel each other out. But now, and then, for reasons we don't yet understand, a few sections fall into tune. Their vibrations align, producing a chord so harmonious it resonates through the entire hall. That resonance is not noise, it's coherence. And coherence in this metaphor might be awareness, the brain momentarily realizing itself as one unified performance. The orchestrated theory is controversial, and rightly so. The quantum world is fragile. Coherence, that delicate harmony, tends to vanish whenever it meets warmth, complexity or chaos, and the brain is all three. Most neuroscientists doubt that quantum processes could survive in such a noisy environment, yet even the critics admit the question is fascinating. Because if consciousness truly requires this kind of ultra-fine coordination, it might mean our minds are connected to the deepest level of physical reality. Not as magic, but as participation in the same shimmering dance that underlies matter itself. Whether or not the theory turns out to be correct, it captures something poetic about the relationship between mind and world. The idea that thought could depend on coherence, on patterns of alignment, mirrors everything we know about the universe. Stars form when gravity pulls chaos into order. Music emerges when sound waves align into rhythm. Even the cells in your body depend on synchronized cycles of chemistry. Harmony, at every scale, seems to create something new. Perhaps consciousness is simply harmony felt from the inside. The universe, briefly aware of its own pattern. Around the same time, Hameroff and Penrose were dreaming of quantum orchestras. Another scientist, Karl Pribram, proposed a different but equally lyrical metaphor: the brain as a hologram. In a hologram, every small fragment of a film plate can recreate the entire image when illuminated by light. Scratch the surface, and the picture is still there, only dimmer. Pribram suggested that memory might work this way, not stored in one location like files in a drawer, but distributed across the whole brain as interference patterns of energy. You could damage part of the system, and yet the memory would persist, because every region contains the information of the whole. It's easy to get lost in the word hologram, but all it really means is that the whole is present in every part. You can see this principle in nature. Break a crystal, and each fragment retains the same symmetry as the original. Tear a leaf, and the veins still echo the shape of the tree. Perhaps the mind too is fractal in this way, each thought reflecting the larger pattern of awareness that holds it. Taken together, these ideas, the orchestrated vibrations and the holographic memory, offer a picture of consciousness as a field of coherence. Not a physical field you could measure with a magnet, but a relational one, a space of connection that exists whenever patterns align. It's as though awareness is not something the brain produces, but something it tunes into, the way a radio finds a station already broadcasting. That notion carries both wonder and caution. It invites awe at the thought that your private experience might be woven from the same quantum fabric that shapes galaxies. But it also reminds us to stay humble. No one has proved this is true. It remains a metaphor, a hypothesis, an invitation to imagine. Science advances by testing such invitations, by sifting the poetry for traces of data. Yet even if the data never arrive, the poetry itself can help us think, not as an escape from rigor, but as a way of feeling what rigor cannot yet describe. You can experience something like this coherence directly. Close your eyes for a moment and pay attention to the quiet rhythm of your breath. Notice how thoughts arise, crest and fade, much like waves on a calm sea. Sometimes they're chaotic, colliding and cancelling each other out. But sometimes, perhaps for just a few seconds, everything seems to align. Your breath, your heartbeat, your attention, all fall into sync. The world feels transparent, as though its surface has thinned. That small moment of harmony may not prove anything about quantum mechanics, but it shows how consciousness, in its purest form, is a balance between motion and stillness, a living coherence. As we drift further into our story, we'll begin to step away from the laboratory and into the library of symbols, the inner world where archetypes and myths carry the language of these same patterns in another form. The scientists describe them as fields and vibrations, the psychologists as dreams and stories. But both point to the same mystery, that awareness is both personal and universal, structured yet free, quiet yet endlessly creative. For tonight, you can let the theories settle like dust in a beam of light. Whether the mind's harmony arises from neurons, quantum waves, or something deeper, the experience of it is here, now. The soft hum beneath your thoughts, the steady rhythm of your being. You don't need to solve the equations to feel the wonder of them. The universe may be whispering through every cell, but perhaps it needs a listener, and that listener is you. Imagine walking through a vast library at night. The lamps are dim, the air smells faintly of dust and paper, and every shelf seems to hum with stories that remember being read. Some of these books are your own, memories you've written across years of living. Others are older, written long before you were born, and yet when you open them you recognise the words, the figures inside, the hero, the trickster, the mother, the wise old guide, feel familiar, as if they've lived somewhere within you all along. This library, in Carl Jung's language, is the human psyche itself, and those recurring figures are what he called archetypes, patterns of meaning that weave through every culture, every age, every dream. Jung didn't invent the idea of inner symbols. He simply listened carefully to the stories people told, myths, visions, therapy sessions, dreams, and noticed the same images repeating across lives that never touched. A person in Switzerland might dream of a serpent swallowing its tail. Another in Egypt might carve the same image into a temple wall. A child might imagine an invisible friend who gives advice, much like the ancient shamans who sought wisdom from spirits. Jung began to suspect that beneath our individual consciousness lies a shared layer, a kind of psychic inheritance, a collective unconscious. But unlike a storage room of fixed ideas, he saw it as a living ocean, full of forms that rise and sink like waves, shaping our thoughts from below. To make that idea softer, imagine the human mind as a lake. The surface reflects your current thoughts, what you know, what you notice, what you plan to do next. Below the surface lie your personal memories swirling like currents, and deeper still, at the lake's floor, are the sediments of humanity itself, patterns of story, instinct, and image that every person carries, whether they know it or not. When something from that deep layer stirs, it rises through dreams, art, or intuition, surfacing as symbols that feel ancient yet new. A cross, a circle, a labyrinth, a door. We respond to them not because we're taught to, but because something in us remembers their meaning. In this quiet library, one of the most mysterious figures is the shadow. Jung used this word not for darkness or evil, but for the parts of ourselves we don't want to see, the emotions, desires, or fears we hide behind the shelves. Every time we judge someone harshly or feel sudden dislike without knowing why, it may be the shadow showing us a reflection. The irony is that the shadow isn't our enemy. It's simply the unvisited room in the house of the self. To explore it is to turn on a light in a corner long forgotten. Jung once wrote that enlightenment doesn't come from imagining figures of light, but from making the darkness conscious. In other words, wholeness means integration, not perfection, but completeness. You can sense this in your own life. Think of a recurring dream that leaves you uneasy, or a pattern that repeats despite your best efforts to change it. These are whispers from the shadow, asking to be read rather than suppressed. When you meet them with curiosity instead of fear, they transform. A dream of falling becomes a reminder to trust the unknown. A nightmare of pursuit becomes an invitation to turn and face what you've been running from. The more you listen, the more the library within you begins to speak in full sentences. At the centre of this inner library lies the figure Jung called the self, not the everyday me that worries and plans, but the deep organising principle that holds everything together. The self is like the librarian who knows where every book belongs, even the ones we've misplaced. It contains both the shadowed corners and the bright aisles. To experience it is to feel both small and infinite at once, a moment of stillness in which every contradiction makes sense. Many spiritual traditions echo this idea in different forms: the higher self, the Buddha nature, the soul, the spark of divinity. For Jung, these weren't supernatural beliefs but psychological realities, ways of describing how the psyche seeks balance and meaning. Everyday life offers gentle metaphors for this. When you tidy your room, you're not just arranging objects, you're mirroring the inner wish for order. When you pause to listen to a friend, you create a space wide enough for two stories to coexist. These acts of integration, outer and inner, are small reflections of the same pattern the self enacts within. The mind, like the universe, seems to organize itself toward coherence. Jung believed that this journey toward wholeness, he called it individuation, is the real adventure of human life. It's not about becoming perfect or enlightened, but about becoming real, about seeing yourself clearly and accepting what you find. He compared it to alchemy, the ancient art of transforming lead into gold. In psychological terms, the lead is our unconscious impulses and fears. The gold is awareness itself. The alchemist's furnace is the heart, where experiences are heated, stirred, and eventually refined into understanding. You can think of every challenge in your life as part of that process. When loss cracks you open, when love changes your shape, when time humbles you, these are the fires of transformation. The shadow brings raw material, the self provides the container, and consciousness becomes the gold distilled from experience. It's an endless cycle, one that never quite finishes because the psyche, like the cosmos, keeps expanding. To see this from a wider lens, notice how these psychological ideas echo what we've explored in physics. Just as M theory describes brains vibrating in higher dimensions, the psyche can be seen as layers of vibration, archetypal patterns resonating through generations. The hidden dimensions of the universe and the hidden dimensions of the mind may be reflections of each other. Both are ways of describing unseen order behind visible form. In this sense, every myth, every symbol, is a bridge between inner and outer worlds. The hero's journey across distant lands is also the soul's journey through its own depths. The dragon we fight might be fear, the treasure we find, understanding. When you start to view life this way, ordinary moments gain quiet significance. The lost key you finally find in your coat pocket, the sudden memory stirred by a scent, the stranger whose face seems familiar. Each can feel like a page turning in the inner library, revealing connections you didn't know existed. Awareness itself becomes the light that lets you read. From here, our path flows naturally into even older rivers of thought. Long before modern psychology, sages in India, China, and Greece were describing the same mysterious wholeness in other languages. They spoke of a reality where mind and world are not two things but one, where the wave and the ocean are made of the same water. As we drift onward, we'll listen to those voices too, seeing how their ancient maps of consciousness mirror what science and Jung hinted at. But for now, you can rest in your own quiet library, knowing that every story within you, light or shadow, joy or sorrow, belongs to the same vast unfolding self. Imagine a river flowing through a valley, Its waters twist and shimmer in the sunlight, dividing briefly around stones before rejoining in quiet pools downstream. Now imagine that the river, the stones, the valley, and even the air above it are not separate things at all, but expressions of the same presence, water in motion, stillness, and mist. That is what the sages of many traditions tried to say when they spoke of non-duality, that the essence of reality is one, even though it appears as many. In India, the philosophy of Advaita Vedanta used the simplest image possible to express this: the ocean and the wave. The ocean is boundless awareness. The wave is the individual self. Each wave rises, curls, and disappears back into the sea, but the water never changes its nature. In that view, consciousness doesn't belong to us. We belong to it. We are localized movements in an infinite field of knowing. When we mistake the wave for the whole ocean, we suffer from a kind of cosmic homesickness, a longing to return to what we already are. The word Advaita means not two. It doesn't deny that we see multiplicity. It simply says that beneath every distinction, the same substance flows. Matter and mind, inner and outer, self and other. These are ways the one awareness perceives itself. To understand this, the sages said, you don't have to leave the world or renounce your senses. You simply have to notice the background that never changes. While thoughts rise and fade, awareness remains. Like the sky behind passing clouds, it is untouched by whatever moves through it. In the quiet of meditation, you can feel this truth directly. Sit still for a moment and notice how sounds, sensations, and thoughts appear on their own. You don't create them. They arise, shimmer, and vanish. Yet something in you observes without effort. That witnessing presence, silent, clear, always here, is what Vedanta calls the self, or Atman. And here comes the startling claim that self is not a fragment inside you. It is the same reality that the universe itself is made of, what they called Brahman. The teaching is not mystical poetry, but a statement of identity. The listener and the cosmic song are the same. Across the sea in ancient China and India, a related insight appeared in the Buddhist school, known as Yogacara, the mind-only tradition. Its teachers didn't speak of a permanent self, but they pointed toward the same horizon, that experience is built entirely within consciousness. What we call the world is a flowing projection of mind shaped by perception and habit. The mountain, the bird, the sound of the wind, all arise in awareness and depend on it to be known. The mind, said these teachers, is like a painter who becomes lost in their own painting, forgetting they are holding the brush. When we wake up, we remember that subject and object, dreamer and dream, are woven of the same fabric. Yogacar's language was more psychological than metaphysical. It described 8 layers of consciousness, from raw sensory impressions to a deep storehouse mind, where impressions of all experiences are kept as seeds. Each seed, when triggered, blossoms into perception. Nothing exists independently. Everything is relational. If you picture your mind as a garden, this storehouse is the soil. Every thought, action, and word plants something there. Over time, those seeds grow into the landscape of your reality. Cultivating awareness, then, means tending the garden, pulling weeds of illusion, planting seeds of compassion, and remembering that the gardener and the soil are not separate. Centuries later in the West, another philosopher glimpsed the same truth through different words. Plotinus, living in the Roman world, spoke of the One, the intellect, and the soul. The One is like the source of light too brilliant to be seen directly. From it flows the intellect, the realm of pure ideas, and from the intellect flows the soul, which animates the material world. But this is not a hierarchy of distance, it's a cascade of illumination. Every level contains the presence of the One, just as every reflection of the sun still holds its radiance. To return to the One is not to climb upward, but to turn inward, remembering that light is already shining through us. Plotinus's language mirrors the same intuition found in Vedanta and Yogacara. The universe is an emanation, not construction. It unfolds like a flower opening towards sunlight, and the human mind is one petal through which that light becomes aware of itself. When you gaze at a sunset, you're not an observer standing apart from beauty. You are beauty momentarily perceiving itself. If all this sounds abstract, try translating it into daily life. Imagine you're standing in a crowded station. Dozens of voices, announcements, and footsteps blend into chaos. But then you catch the rhythm beneath it, the rise and fall of sound forming a single, continuous hum. Nothing has changed, yet the noise becomes music. Non-duality is that shift of perception. The world doesn't disappear. It simply rearranges itself into harmony. You can sense it even in small gestures. The warmth of holding someone's hand, the stillness of watching rain on glass, the feeling of breathing in sync with the tide of your own heartbeat. For an instant, the separation between you and what you experience dissolves. Awareness and its contents become one. That unity doesn't cancel individuality. It reveals the ground that allows individuality to play. Waves keep rising, but now they know they are water. Modern science, curiously, has begun to echo this view in cautious ways. Physicists describe entanglement, particles linked so intimately that what happens to one affects the other, even across vast distances. Consciousness researchers talk about integration, coherence, and feedback loops. Systems aware of themselves. None of these are proofs of non-duality, but they remind us that connection runs deeper than we once thought. The universe may not be a collection of things, but a web of relationships, each thread aware of its tension and tone. The value of these ancient philosophies isn't in their metaphysical claims, but in their practicality. They invite us to live as if separation were only half true, to act with the awareness that everything we touch is part of ourselves. When you care for the planet, you're caring for the larger body you inhabit. When you listen without judgment, you dissolve the wall between minds. When you forgive, you stop defending the illusion of a small self and remember the ocean beneath the wave. Let's take a moment to breathe this in. Feel the air entering, leaving, entering again. Notice that the breath isn't yours. It moves through you the way the river moves through a valley. The same molecules may pass through leaves, clouds, and other living beings. You are the valley, the river, and the breath itself. Awareness isn't contained within your head. It's the quiet field in which everything happens, the screen on which the movie of life unfolds. From here, the story of our exploration begins to shift. We've listened to science and ancient wisdom describe awareness as both structure and substance, as vibration and stillness. Now we'll turn our gaze toward the borderlands of experience, the moments when awareness seems to step outside the body altogether. Near-death experiences, moments of precognition, or the curious patterns of connection during great world events. Each hints, however faintly, that consciousness might reach farther than we expect. But before we step into those mysteries, rest in this simple recognition. You are the river and the water, the light and the eye that sees it, the question and the quiet that holds the answer. Hospitals have their own kind of silence. It's not the peaceful quiet of a forest or the hush before sleep, but something charged, an atmosphere made of breathing machines, soft footsteps, and time stretched thin. In that silence, strange things sometimes happen. Patients who should have been unconscious later speak of seeing the room from above, of hearing doctors call for instruments, of light that wasn't blinding but welcoming. These stories are called near-death experiences or NDEs. They're fragile testimonies from the border between life and whatever comes next, and they've intrigued physicians, philosophers, and poets alike. Let's wander gently into this subject. No claims, no certainties, just the human stories and the science that listens to them. One of the most careful studies of these experiences came from a cardiologist named Pim van Lommel. In 2001, he and his team followed heart attack survivors who had been clinically dead for minutes before being revived. About 1 in 5 described vivid memories, a feeling of leaving their bodies, entering a tunnel, meeting beings of light, or watching scenes from their own lives unfold in panoramic detail. What struck researchers wasn't just the content, but the clarity. These experiences were remembered more sharply than ordinary dreams, sometimes unchanged years later. Skeptics suggest simpler explanations. When oxygen drops, the brain releases neurotransmitters that can create bright visions. The visual cortex may misfire, producing the tunnel effect. Endorphins ease pain, giving rise to peace. The temporal lobes, regions linked with emotion and memory, might activate in strange loops as the body shuts down. Each theory captures a piece of the picture, but none fits it completely. Even patients whose hearts were stopped, whose EEG readings showed no detectable activity, sometimes reported perceptions of things that happened in the room, details they couldn't have seen from their position on the bed. To test this, doctors designed quiet experiments under the codename AWARE, short for awareness during resuscitation. In one hospital, hidden images were placed high on shelves near cardiac monitors, visible only from above. The hope was simple. If anyone later described those images accurately, it might mean that consciousness, at least for a moment, existed apart from the body. The results so far are modest. No one has yet described the hidden pictures, but a few patients have given accounts of sounds and procedures verified by staff. For science, that's enough to keep the question alive. Still, statistics can't convey what these moments feel like. To glimpse that, imagine one composite story drawn from many. A woman lies on an operating table. The room is cool, metal shining under bright lights. As her heart stops, she feels no fear, only a gentle detachment, as though she has become air. She hears the distant rhythm of the monitor, then silence. Suddenly she's aware of floating, looking down at the scene. She sees her own body, the surgeon's calm urgency, the blue sheet trembling slightly with each compression. Then, in an instant, the room fades. She finds herself moving through darkness that isn't dark, toward a radiance that seems to breathe. There is music, or something like it, not sound, but meaning. When she wakes later, the world feels both new and impossibly familiar. Such accounts vary across cultures. Some speak of ancestors, some of gardens or cities of light, but the emotional core is strikingly consistent. Peace, interconnectedness, an overwhelming sense of love. Many who return describe losing their fear of death. They live differently, less hurried, more compassionate, as though a deeper current now runs beneath daily life. Even if their experience was generated entirely within the brain, the transformation it brings is real. Something changes when a person touches the idea that awareness might extend beyond physical limits. From a neuroscientific view, NDEs are a window into how consciousness behaves under extreme stress. The boundary between life and death is not a sharp line, but a fading gradient. Brain cells can survive several minutes without blood flow, and within that twilight they may fire in waves, bursts of organized activity rather than chaos. One study in animals recorded a surge of high-frequency coherence seconds after cardiac arrest, suggesting the brain's last act may be one of integration, not disintegration, a final chord rather than static. That finding doesn't prove the soul leaves the body, but it invites us to reconsider what end means. The threshold of death may be more like the soft edge of a cloud than the wall we imagine. If consciousness is indeed a kind of field, as some philosophers and physicists cautiously propose, then perhaps the body is not its container, but its focus, like a lens gathering light. When the lens cracks, the light doesn't vanish, it simply disperses. Whether that dispersion includes personal awareness or only energy, we don't yet know. but the metaphor helps us feel the continuity between life and what might lie beyond it. There's a tenderness in this idea that transcends proof. Even for those who doubt anything survives death, the near-death experience holds value as a psychological mirror. It reminds us that the mind is capable of extraordinary beauty even under crisis, that our final moments might not be terror but transcendence. It also urges humility. We often treat consciousness as a byproduct of neurons, but perhaps it's more accurate to see neurons as instruments through which a larger awareness plays. When the instrument falls silent, the music might continue in ways we can't yet detect. You can sense a whisper of that mystery even now. Think of the times you felt profoundly still, watching snow fall, or sitting beside someone you love, or lying awake in the small hours while the world breathes around you. In those moments, awareness feels vast and weightless, as if it could float beyond the edges of skin. Near-death experiences might be that same expansion intensified, a glimpse of consciousness unbound by its usual frame. Of course, there are other explanations. The human brain is astonishingly good at constructing meaning from fragments, at turning chemical storms into stories of purpose and light. But maybe that's the point. Whether we're glimpsing eternity or crafting it, the longing for continuity, for reunion with the greater whole, reveals what consciousness values most: connection. The language of the dying, the recurring words of light, love, and unity, sounds remarkably like the language of non-duality we met in the previous session. Different culture, same current. Before we drift further, take a breath and notice the air moving through you. Life, at this moment, is as near to you as that breath, and as mysterious as whatever takes it away. The study of near-death experiences doesn't promise certainty, only wonder, the sense that existence might be more continuous than we think. As we follow this thread deeper, we'll look at other moments when consciousness seems to reach beyond ordinary boundaries, premonitions, lucid flashes near the end of life, the strange synchrony of minds during great events. For now, let the thoughts settle like a candle flame in still air. Awareness, however fragile it seems, may be the most enduring thing we know. There are moments when time feels slippery, when the future seems to lean toward us before it arrives. You reach for the phone just before it rings. You wake seconds before your alarm. You think of a friend you haven't seen in years, and a message from them appears that very day. We shrug these off as coincidence, and most of them surely are, yet part of us wonders. Could awareness, in rare moments, brush against the edges of tomorrow? Scientists have given that faint question a name: presentiment, the quiet physiological stirring that seems to occur seconds before an unpredictable event. In laboratory settings, researchers show volunteers images at random, alternating between calm scenes and ones designed to evoke emotion. Heart rate, skin conductivity, and pupil dilation are measured before each picture appears. Strangely, in some experiments, the body reacts a second or two before the emotional image is shown. Tiny accelerations of heartbeat, subtle sweats on the palm, as though the body knew what the eyes had not yet seen. The effect is small, fragile, and controversial. Many studies find nothing. Some show patterns that, when averaged, whisper of something unusual. Psychologists like Julia Mossbridge have sifted through decades of data, finding that across hundreds of trials, the hints persist. Not proof, but a suggestion that the mind may be entangled with time more intricately than we realise. Critics point out the difficulties of randomisation, expectation, and statistical noise. And yet, like faint starlight barely reaching our instruments, the signal keeps returning, asking to be interpreted. To imagine how this could be possible, we might soften the language of physics. In the quantum world, cause and effect are not always cleanly separated. Some interpretations suggest that particles interact not only forward, but also backward, in time, adjusting to the outcomes that eventually occur. These ideas are still theoretical, but they hint at a reality where past and future are woven together like threads in a single fabric. If consciousness participates in that fabric, even faintly, it might sometimes catch the tug of a thread before the pattern fully emerges. But perhaps we don't need to invoke particles at all. The human nervous system itself is a web of prediction. Long before modern science, our survival depended on sensing danger before it struck. The rustle of a predator, the shift in wind before a storm, the brain constantly forecasts, updating each moment against the next. Most of those forecasts stay below awareness, experienced only as a sudden gut feeling or a chill along the spine. In that light, presentiment may not be supernatural at all, but the natural intelligence of a body attuned to subtle cues, tiny changes in posture, smell, temperature, that the conscious mind cannot name. Whether physical or psychic, it reminds us that time is not a series of boxes but a current, and awareness is what drifts within it. There is another phenomenon, quieter but equally mysterious, called terminal lucidity. It happens in the last days or hours of life, most often among people who have lost memory or speech to dementia or brain injury. After months of confusion, they may suddenly awaken to clarity, recognizing loved ones, recalling names, speaking in full sentences. The change is often brief but profound, like a final clearing of clouds before dusk. Doctors have documented such cases for centuries, yet no one fully understands them. Some think the chemistry of dying temporarily restores balance in the brain. Others suspect a shift in blood flow or electrical activity. Still others wonder whether consciousness, no longer bound by damaged circuits, finds another route to express itself, if only for a moment. Families rarely care which explanation is true. They simply hold the hand that once again feels familiar and whisper their goodbyes through tears. Whatever its cause, terminal lucidity carries a message that touches both science and spirit. It suggests that the person we love may be more intact than appearances show, that awareness might persist behind even the thickest veils of confusion. It invites compassion toward all minds that seem lost, reminding us that consciousness can retreat into quiet depths and return when the moment allows. In that way, it's not just a medical curiosity, but a lesson in dignity. Both presentiment and terminal lucidity reveal something subtle about the nature of mind. It may not be confined to the ordinary flow of minutes and seconds. In one, the future seems to brush the present. In the other, the past momentarily blooms again before fading. The arrow of time, which feels so strict in daily life, softens at the edges, bending toward meaning rather than measurement. If you've ever sat with someone nearing the end of life, you may have felt this bending. The hours seem to slow, conversation becomes luminous. Ordinary things, a cup of water, the pattern of light on a blanket, gain a strange importance. Many describe a sense of presence in the room that defies explanation, as though time itself is holding its breath. In those moments, we realize that awareness may stretch wider than we think, encompassing beginnings and endings in one unbroken gesture. The same feeling can visit us in smaller ways, a déjà vu that seems to collapse time, a dream that later unfolds in waking life, a sense of rightness guiding a decision you can't yet justify. Whether these glimpses are products of intuition, coincidence, or something deeper, they remind us that consciousness is not a rigid observer of time. It is the canvas upon which time is painted, and sometimes, for reasons we may never measure, the painting shows the next brushstroke before it happens. Skepticism, of course, has its rightful place. The mind is a master storyteller, and probability alone can mimic the appearance of foresight. Our memories are flexible. We remember hits more than misses. Still, humility works both ways. Just as belief without evidence leads to superstition, disbelief without curiosity leads to blindness. The healthiest position may be the quiet middle, wonder held in open hands. Let's pause here and breathe. Think of time not as a straight path but as a spiral, each moment looping back to touch others. When you feel a shiver of intuition, or when someone you love seems to shine for a moment after long silence, you're touching that spiral. Whether these events are neural storms or glimpses of a larger order, they carry the same invitation to be fully present, to listen, to honour the mystery. From here, our journey moves outward again. We'll look at how minds, even separated by distance, sometimes seem to move in unison, through experiments in remote viewing and the curious fluctuations measured by devices that track the world's collective heartbeat. Each of these, like the studies we've just explored, may or may not point to something beyond coincidence, but together they keep alive the same quiet question that runs beneath this entire story. What if awareness is not bounded by the brain at all, but part of a field so vast that it touches everyone, everywhere, all at once? There are times when the boundaries of perception seem porous, when a thought, an image, or a sudden certainty arrives from nowhere as if borrowed from a distance. During the Cold War, such mysteries captured not only poets and philosophers, but governments. In a quiet building at Stanford Research Institute, a handful of scientists, artists, and former intelligence officers sat in dim rooms with notepads and clocks, attempting the improbable, to see distant locations using only the mind. They called it remote viewing, an experiment in stretching awareness beyond the limits of eyes and maps. At first glance, it sounds like fiction, but the early researchers, among them physicists Russell Targ and Harold Puthoff, treated it as a question rather than a claim. If consciousness is somehow connected to the fabric of reality, as some interpretations of quantum theory hint, then perhaps information could travel along pathways subtler than light. The volunteers would sit quietly while an assistant visited a secret target location, a park, a bridge, a warehouse. Later, the viewer would sketch or describe impressions, shapes, textures, feelings. Sometimes the drawings were uncannily close: a circular fountain, a tall tower, a pattern of windows. Often they were vague or wrong. The results were inconsistent, hovering in that twilight between coincidence and curiosity. The US government quietly funded the project for years under codenames that sound lifted from novels: Stargate, Grill Flame, Sunstreak. The work was eventually declassified in the 1990s. Analysts who reviewed it found glimmers of success amid a sea of noise. A few cases hinted at hits too precise to dismiss entirely. Many more were inconclusive. The conclusion, fittingly, was itself uncertain. Perhaps there is something here, but not something we yet understand. What makes remote viewing interesting isn't whether it works in the dramatic sense, but how it reveals the mind's tendency to reach beyond itself. The viewers described the experience less as seeing and more as receiving, as if impressions arose from a field shared between subject and object. They spoke of tuning their attention like a radio dial, trying to match frequencies. Whether those frequencies were neural patterns, imagination, or something deeper, the act of reaching seemed to open a space of quiet receptivity, a practice not so different from meditation or prayer. This notion, that awareness might extend or synchronize across minds, appears in another far more global experiment. In the late 1990s, researchers at Princeton University built a network of small devices called random number generators, or RNGs. Each machine continually produced sequences of ones and zeros, like coin flips, using quantum noise as its source of unpredictability. Under normal conditions, these outputs should remain balanced, half ones, half zeros, with no discernible pattern. But the team, led by psychologist Roger Nelson, wondered whether large emotional events might influence this random flow. The project became known as the Global Consciousness Project, and its data still trickle in quietly to this day. During ordinary times, the numbers behave as expected, pure randomness. But during moments when millions of people around the world share focus, tragedies, celebrations, or global meditations, slight deviations appear. The patterns drift away from perfect randomness, forming subtle coherence, as if the collective emotion of humanity presses faintly on the fabric of chance. These fluctuations are tiny, the kind you'd never notice without vast statistics. Critics point out that with enough data, coincidences are inevitable. Supporters counter that the timing of these deviations aligning with world-shaking events remains intriguing. The truth may lie in between, a tantalizing pattern not yet explained, a whisper from data that says only, keep listening. Whether or not these studies prove anything about a global mind, they share a common theme, the search for connectedness. Science, at its heart, is not the conquest of mystery, but its translation into questions we can ask out loud. The remote viewers, sitting in silence with pencils poised, were not so different from mystics seeking vision, or lovers sensing each other's presence across distance. Each was testing the same hope, that awareness is more spacious than it seems, and perhaps it is. Consider empathy, that everyday miracle where you can feel another's joy or pain without words. No wires connect two hearts, no equations are needed. Yet a look, a tone, a shared silence can transfer meaning instantly. On a planetary scale, that same empathy might ripple invisibly through networks of thought and emotion, weaving a subtle coherence that machines, by accident or design, sometimes detect. You can sense this interconnectedness in ordinary life. When a great event unfolds, the birth of a child, the loss of a loved one, the instant after a major disaster, the air itself feels charged. We reach for one another, call, message, pray. The world seems briefly synchronized, hearts beating in a single rhythm of attention. Maybe that rhythm leaves a trace, not only in memory but in the quiet statistics of random machines. Whether the numbers truly respond or not, the longing they symbolize is real, the desire for a universe that notices our collective heartbeat. Let's bring this closer. Sit for a moment and recall the last time you felt suddenly connected to someone far away. Perhaps you thought of them just before their message arrived, or sensed their sadness before hearing their voice. Science would call it coincidence, and perhaps it is. But beneath coincidence lies resonance. Two patterns aligning, not by command, but by harmony. You could call it intuition, empathy, or simply love. The label doesn't matter. What matters is the felt recognition that consciousness, however private, is never completely alone. Even if the experiments of remote viewing and global coherence never move beyond ambiguity, they have already succeeded in a subtler way. They remind us to wonder how much of reality remains unseen because we expect it to be silent. They invite us to listen for correlations not as proof, but as poetry, faint rhymes across the vast page of experience. As we drift from these outer experiments back toward the intimate, we begin to notice how these same questions echo within the individual mind. The world's devices may measure small deviations, but inside each of us, similar fluctuations occur whenever awareness expands, when intuition sparks, when empathy bridges distance, when love defies explanation. Perhaps the real global mind is not a network of machines, but the collective awakening of billions of quiet hearts learning to listen. From here, our path will turn inward once more. We'll explore the hidden continuity of memory, how traces of experience may linger beyond the body and across generations, appearing in dreams, habits, even in the deep language of the genes. The question will remain the same. If consciousness is more like a field than a flame, how far can its warmth travel? For now, rest in the thought that the universe might already be listening, not through instruments or sensors, but through you. Imagine opening an old box of letters tied with a faded ribbon. Some are written in ink that has bled with time, others in pencil so faint you can barely read the words. As you lift each one, you notice something peculiar. The letters were written long before you were born, yet they seem to speak directly to your life, to your fears, your joys, your choices. In a quiet way, that's what modern biology is beginning to discover. The body, it turns out, may keep a form of correspondence with the past. We used to think inheritance meant only DNA, those long strings of code that spell out the blueprint of who we are. But now scientists have found another layer of information resting lightly on top, like notes scribbled in the margins. These markings don't rewrite the words, they underline or soften them, turning genes on or off depending on what the body has lived through. Stress, nutrition, trauma, love, all can leave small chemical bookmarks that whisper to future generations. This is called epigenetic inheritance, and it has changed how we think about memory. You could say life doesn't just pass on instructions, it passes on impressions. A mother's hunger during wartime might adjust her child's metabolism decades later. A grandfather's exposure to toxins might echo in the health of his grandchildren. These aren't mystical tales, but measured effects seen in both animals and humans. A biological record of experience written not in stone, but in pencil. And just like pencil marks, they can fade, be rewritten or strengthened, depending on what life continues to teach. There's something profoundly human in this discovery. It suggests that memory isn't confined to the skull. Every cell carries stories of what it has endured and adapted to. You might not remember your ancestors' hardships in words, but your body may still hum with their lessons, their caution, their resilience, their longing for safety or joy. It doesn't mean we're prisoners of their past, only that we're accompanied by it. The body, like a library, holds both the old and the new, the inherited and the chosen. Of course, the idea of memory beyond the body's borders has long captured the imagination too. You've probably heard stories of organ transplant recipients who develop unfamiliar cravings or habits, a pianist who suddenly loves spicy food, a quiet man who starts writing poetry after receiving a young poet's heart. Such tales are striking, and scientists have investigated them carefully. While most turn out to be coincidence or psychological adaptation, they remind us that the body and mind are deeply intertwined. Every cell communicates through networks of hormones, proteins, and subtle electrical rhythms. When we exchange even a small piece of living tissue, we exchange part of a communication system, and perhaps, at least metaphorically, part of a story. It's tempting to leap from this to the idea of a literal memory field, a shared reservoir of experience floating beyond the body. Some researchers, like Rupert Sheldrake, have suggested that nature itself might remember, that habits form not just in species but in space, through what he calls morphic resonance. These ideas remain controversial and unproven, yet their poetry lingers. Whether or not such a field exists, they capture a feeling we all recognise, that knowledge sometimes moves through us rather than from us, like a wind that carries the scent of things we've never touched. Jung spoke of a similar inheritance, not biological but symbolic. He called it the collective unconscious, a shared attic of images and instincts that shapes our dreams and myths. When you find yourself drawn to certain symbols, keys, doors, circles, rivers, you may be responding to something older than yourself. It's as though your psyche, like your cells, remembers patterns that humanity has lived many times before. These patterns aren't destinies, they're invitations to awareness. To notice them is to become a participant in a much longer story. You can see this play out in families. Perhaps you've noticed how emotional themes seem to echo across generations, a tendency towards silence, or generosity, or restlessness. Sometimes we repeat what our ancestors couldn't resolve. Other times, we finish what they began. Therapy, storytelling, even simple reflection can act like gentle editing, allowing new notes to be added to the old melody. Healing in this view isn't erasing the past, it's composing harmony with it. Epigenetics offers a biological mirror for that idea. The marks written on our genes are not fates carved in stone. They respond to environment, diet, stress, and love, to the lives we lead and the care we give ourselves. Meditation, exercise, safe relationships, and creative expression can all soften harmful patterns, allowing new chemical bookmarks of well-being to form. In this way, modern science and ancient wisdom quietly agree. Awareness itself is a kind of medicine. When you bring light to what you've inherited, whether through thought, feeling, or action, you change how it's carried forward. Think of it like tuning an instrument that's been passed down through generations. Each player leaves subtle wear on the wood, shaping the tone. When it reaches your hands, the strings still vibrate with echoes of those who played before. You can't erase their touch, but you can retune, adding your own song. In doing so, you don't just play for yourself, you play for everyone who once held the instrument, and for those who will hold it after you. That's the heart of what might be called deep remembering. Whether it happens through molecules, myths, or family stories, it connects us to a web of continuity that science and spirit both glimpse from different angles. You don't have to believe in fields or morphic resonance to feel it. You can sense it every time an old family recipe tastes like home, or when a certain melody brings tears you can't explain, or when a fear you thought was yours alone reveals itself as a shared inheritance. Awareness of these threads doesn't burden you. It gives you context, compassion, and choice. So how do we live with this knowledge practically? By listening more widely. When you feel a strong emotion, notice where it sits in the body, chest, stomach, throat, and ask softly, is this mine, or might it be older? The question isn't to find blame, but to expand understanding. When you hear a family story, listen for both the pain and the resilience it carries. When you walk through your neighbourhood, notice how the land itself holds memory. The trees that have seen generations pass, the walls that remember laughter and rain. In doing so, you practice what could be called field awareness, a gentle, everyday sensitivity to connection. You don't need to prove that consciousness travels across space or time to live as though everything matters, because in a very real biological sense it does. The life you live today becomes the environment that writes in pencil on tomorrow's margins. Your calm can soften inherited anxiety. Your kindness can become chemistry in a child not yet born. The notes you leave behind may guide someone you'll never meet, humming quietly in their blood. As we drift further, our journey turns from inheritance to participation. If we are shaped by the fields we live in, biological, emotional, cultural, then we can also shape them in return. The next steps will be about that active listening, how to notice more, feel more, and live more consciously in the vast folded space of being. For now, rest in the thought that you're not only the result of countless stories, you're their continuation, their next unfolding paragraph written in light and breath. If consciousness truly moves through more layers than our senses can name, then living well might begin not with belief, but with attention. Most of us spend our days on the surface of awareness, planning, reacting, scrolling, checking, deciding. But beneath that steady stream runs something quieter, a field of impressions and subtleties that we usually overlook. Learning to sense it doesn't require any special training or mystical effort. It's more like learning a new language, the language of noticing. You might call this practice dimensional literacy, the ability to read the textures of experience as though they were pages of a larger book. The first lesson is simplicity. Everything begins with the body. Before you make a decision or rush into action, pause for a few seconds and notice how your body feels as you imagine each option. One direction will often bring a faint expansion, like air filling your chest. The other, a contraction, as if space narrows inside you. The body speaks before the mind translates. This gentle somatic check-in doesn't replace logic, it complements it. When both intuition and reason point the same way, you know the decision fits the larger pattern of your life. The next practice is synchronicity journaling. Jung used the word synchronicity for coincidences that feel charged with meaning, when an inner state and an outer event seem to rhyme. A dream about an old friend followed by their unexpected message, a song that answers a question you've been quietly asking. Whether such events are cosmic choreography or the brain's pattern seeking, they can serve as mirrors for reflection. Writing them down turns fleeting wonder into gentle study. Each evening you can note 3 things: something that happened, how it felt, and what it might suggest, not as prophecy, but as conversation with the world. Over time, patterns emerge. You begin to see which themes orbit your life, perhaps patience, courage, forgiveness, and how the universe, or your subconscious, keeps nudging you to practice them. The key is balance. Notice without over-interpreting. Listen without forcing meaning. Like listening to music, you let the melody come to you rather than chasing it. A third exercise takes place in the twilight between waking and sleep, a realm ancient artists called the Door of Dreams. Neuroscientists refer to it as the hypnagogic state, that hazy drift when images and thoughts mingle freely. It's a small opening in the mind's curtain, where creativity and memory blend. Thomas Edison used to sit with a ball in his hand, letting it drop as he began to doze. The sound would wake him just as visions formed, allowing him to record ideas before they vanished. You can try a gentler version. Keep a notebook beside your bed, and before sleep write a quiet question. It can be practical: how should I approach this project? Or personal: what am I not seeing clearly? In the morning, note any dreams, symbols, or moods that linger. Don't search for precise answers, just notice recurring images. The unconscious speaks in metaphor, not bullet points. These small rituals cultivate awareness like a gardener, tending soil, loosening it, aerating it, letting deeper roots breathe. But none of them are meant to replace skepticism. In fact, the most vital habit in multidimensional living is something I like to call the skeptic's pause. It's simple. Whenever something feels too extraordinary or too convenient to be true, stop and breathe 3 times. Then ask 3 questions. What else could this mean? What evidence supports or challenges it? And what response would be kindest to everyone involved? This pause doesn't dampen wonder. It gives it structure, ensuring that open-mindedness doesn't drift into gullibility. In the expanded landscape of consciousness, skepticism is not a fence but a compass, one that keeps curiosity moving without getting lost. Practicing these tools day by day begins to change perception. You start noticing details that once hid in plain sight, the way someone's tone shifts when they're nervous, the subtle lift in your mood after standing near trees, the rhythm of your own breathing aligning with music. The world becomes textured, multi-dimensional, not in a supernatural sense, but in a vividly human one. Even silence feels full, like the pause between waves. To illustrate, imagine walking to work. Usually your attention jumps from phone to thought to streetlight, but today you decide to practice noticing. You feel the ground through your shoes, the air cool on your skin. You glance at the faces passing by and sense small stories behind each one. The mind slows, the heart widens, and suddenly the ordinary scene feels luminous. Nothing mystical has occurred. You've simply allowed awareness to unfold through more dimensions of experience. Dimensional literacy is not about believing you can control reality. It's about realizing how much of it you already shape by where you place your attention. Psychologists call this the spotlight effect. Whatever you focus on becomes your world. Attention is gravity for meaning. By adjusting its direction, you shift the orbit of your day. You can practice this consciously through what I call micro-choices of perception. When you encounter something unpleasant, a traffic jam, a harsh email, a spilled cup, notice how quickly the body contracts. Then, without denying the frustration, expand your attention to include something neutral: the colour of the sky, the hum of a nearby fan, the rhythm of your breath. This simple widening doesn't erase difficulty, but it adds context. You realise that pain, too, is just one vibration in the wider field of being. Another gentle practice is to spend a few minutes each day noticing patterns that cross categories: how clouds resemble rivers, how conversations echo music, how your own moods change with light. Such noticing trains the mind to see unity behind diversity, the same rhythm of emergence and dissolution repeating at every scale. Over time, this habit weaves calm through daily life. You begin to sense that even when chaos swirls, something beneath it remains ordered and kind. The goal isn't to escape reality, but to inhabit it more fully. Dimensional literacy doesn't ask you to withdraw into philosophy. It invites you to engage the world with clearer senses. It means hearing the nuance in another person's voice, feeling the pulse of your own intuition, and recognizing the pattern that connects them. It means living as though every interaction between people, ideas, or molecules is part of an ongoing conversation, and your awareness is one voice among many. So tonight, as you prepare to rest, you might try a small experiment. Before closing your eyes, recall one moment from today that felt alive. Perhaps a conversation, a colour, a breath of wind. Linger there. Let the sensation expand until you feel the quiet geometry of it, the way sound, emotion, and thought overlap. That simple act is dimensional literacy in motion, learning to read the hidden harmonies that shape experience. From here, the story will turn toward how these harmonies unfold between people, how relationships, creativity, and collaboration might themselves be the visible edges of a shared field. But for now, you can let awareness soften, trusting that even in sleep, the deeper layers of mind continue their gentle dialogue with the universe. Every conversation is a kind of weather. Sometimes the air between two people feels crisp and bright, ideas sparkling like frost in sunlight. Other times it's heavy, full of static, the kind of atmosphere that makes even kind words fall flat. You can't see this field between people, but you can feel it. It shifts with tone, posture, attention, as subtle and real as temperature. Learning to sense this relational climate is the next step in multidimensional living, because every relationship, from the briefest exchange to the deepest love, is a co-created field of awareness. Imagine two musicians improvising. Each plays their own instrument, yet the music that arises belongs to neither alone. It exists in the space between them, a living pattern shaped by listening as much as by sound. Relationships work the same way. The field that forms between you and another person has its own rhythm, its own potential to harmonize or clash. You can feel it when a room brightens with laughter, or when tension lingers after an argument. Paying attention to this field doesn't mean analysing every word. It means noticing the energy underneath. You can start with simple awareness. When you're with someone, check in quietly with your body. Does your chest open or tighten? Does your breath deepen or shallow? Your body reads fields faster than your intellect can interpret them. If you sense contraction, pause before speaking. Sometimes just one slow breath is enough to reset the resonance. In that pause, curiosity can return. You can ask yourself, what wants to be understood here? Another practice is what therapists sometimes call deep dialogue, listening not for response but for presence. When someone speaks, try to hear the meaning behind the words, the feeling that shaped them. Most conflicts soften when both sides feel heard. You don't need to agree, you only need to acknowledge the experience. This shifts the field from defense to discovery. It's like tuning two instruments until their notes no longer fight each other but create a single chord. In close relationships, fields become even more intricate. Lovers, families, and longtime friends often develop a shared rhythm of thought, finishing each other's sentences, sensing each other's moods without explanation. Neuroscientists have found that during deep connection, brainwaves can actually synchronize, like pendulums swinging in unison. The science is young, but it confirms what poetry has always known: empathy is a physical resonance. When one person calms, the other's heartbeat can follow. This means that healing rarely happens alone. Your nervous system takes cues from the company it keeps. A compassionate friend doesn't just comfort you psychologically, their steady presence regulates your biology. Likewise, anger and fear can spread through groups like weather fronts, tightening the field until communication collapses. Becoming aware of this shared physiology helps you approach conflict differently. Instead of seeing others as sources of stress, you can view the whole situation as an energy system seeking equilibrium. The goal isn't to win, but to retune the room. When arguments arise, as they inevitably do, it helps to remember that every conflict has two layers: content and connection. The content is what's being discussed: chores, opinions, timing. The connection is the invisible thread that says, we are safe together. If that thread frays, logic won't help. Re-establish safety first. That might mean stepping outside for air, touching a hand, or saying aloud, I want us to understand each other. Once the nervous systems have cooled, meaning can return. In creative collaboration, the same principle applies. Whether you're writing music, designing a project, or cooking with a friend, creativity flows best when the field between participants feels open and playful. You can sense when an idea lands, a sparkle of recognition, a laugh that bubbles up at the same time. These are micro moments of coherence, where the boundaries between minds thin just enough for something new to enter. Many artists describe this as being guided. Perhaps that's simply what happens when two attentions align so fully that imagination moves through the shared field without resistance. Working with this awareness requires humility. Sometimes you'll notice an archetypal pattern appear in a conversation: the rescuer, the critic, the child, the teacher. Instead of labeling or blaming, you can honor the archetype by recognizing it. The part of us that wants control has arrived, or the part that longs to be cared for is speaking. Seeing these roles play out turns conflict into theatre, freeing both people from identification. The field becomes a stage where insight can unfold rather than a battlefield of egos. Still, there's a danger in using field language as an escape. It's easy to drift into abstraction, to say, we're just working through energy while avoiding direct emotion. True multidimensional living stays grounded. Feel the feeling. Name the need. Keep both feet on the floor. Spiritual bypassing, skipping the human step, collapses the very field you're trying to nurture. Awareness must include embodiment. Compassion begins in the nervous system, not in theory. If you want a practical ritual for relational clarity, try this simple one. Before meeting someone, especially if tension exists, take 3 slow breaths. On the first, picture your attention expanding to include the space around you. On the second, imagine the other person bathed in the same field of light and patience. On the third, silently say, may this conversation reveal understanding. You don't have to visualize perfectly. It's the intention that resets your inner tuning fork. In moments of joy, you can also amplify the positive field. Share appreciation out loud. Gratitude stabilizes resonance like a steady rhythm under improvisation. When you thank someone for their effort or kindness, you're anchoring coherence in the space between you. It's a small act with large consequences. Gratitude changes both the chemistry of the body and the climate of the room. Think back to the earlier image of the universe as a great membrane, a brain vibrating in higher space. Each of us could be seen as a smaller membrane, resonating with others in the same vast medium. Every word, gesture, or silence sends ripples through that fabric. Awareness simply means noticing the ripples and learning to send those that heal rather than harm. As you lie awake at night, replaying conversations, you might try a brief reflection. What tone did I bring into each room today? Did I add noise or harmony? No need for guilt, just noticing shifts the next day's music. Over time, this awareness transforms relationships from collisions of personality into collaborations of consciousness. From here, our exploration will widen once more, from the personal to the planetary. If the relational field shapes families and friendships, perhaps it also shapes the way we meet the world itself. Everyday wonder, decision-making, and creativity all emerge from the same interplay between awareness and form. In the next step, we'll explore how to keep that sense of quiet magic alive while still remembering where you put your keys. For now, rest in this simple truth. Every connection is a classroom. Each person you meet is a mirror reflecting another angle of the same vast awareness. To treat those mirrors with care is to polish the surface of your own understanding until one day the reflection and the viewer feel like one and the same. There's a moment most of us know well. You're standing at the door, ready to leave, coffee in one hand, bag in the other, and your keys are gone. You search the table, your pockets, the counter where they always are, muttering softly as the clock keeps ticking. When you finally find them, usually in the place you looked first, you laugh, half annoyed, half amused. In that tiny moment of relief, you feel something curious. The world seems to breathe with you again. The stress dissolves, the morning light feels softer, and even the sound of the keys in your hand is satisfying, almost musical. That's a small example of the shift we often call magic. Not magic as in breaking the laws of nature, but magic as in seeing them suddenly, vividly alive. Everyday life is full of these miniature awakenings, moments when awareness opens and the ordinary glows with quiet wonder. You don't have to believe in miracles to notice them. You only need to slow down enough to let perception catch up with reality. The practice of everyday magic begins with attention. It's what psychologists call micro-awe, the capacity to find astonishment in small things. A drop of water trembling on a leaf, the hum of a refrigerator merging with birdsong outside, the way sunlight moves across a wall throughout the day, painting invisible clocks. When you notice these details, you're not escaping the world, you're rejoining it. The difference between a mundane morning and a miraculous one is often just the angle of attention. You can try this as a quiet exercise. Step outside for 5 minutes without a goal. Leave your phone behind. Let your senses lead instead of your thoughts. Feel the temperature of the air on your skin, the rhythm of your steps, the way colours change as clouds move. If you can, let your gaze rest on something vast. The sky, the horizon, even the ceiling of your room. Physiologically, this widens your visual field and signals calm to the nervous system. Spiritually, it reminds you that perspective is always available. Another simple ritual is to pair observation with gratitude. When you notice something beautiful or improbable, a stranger's kindness, the smell of bread, the resilience of a small plant pushing through concrete, acknowledge it. You don't need to make it grand. Just whisper inwardly, "Thank you for existing." Gratitude is not a transaction, it's recognition. It says, "I see that you're part of the same fabric I am." In that moment, the boundary between observer and observed softens. You become part of the scenery you were admiring. But wonder alone isn't enough. It needs grounding to stay balanced. Otherwise, curiosity can drift into fantasy and attention into distraction. The challenge of multi-dimensional living is to hold both awe and practicality at once, to gaze at the stars and still remember the grocery list. This balance can be practiced through a gentle decision-making template I like to call the 3 lights. When faced with a choice, pause and check 3 kinds of signals. First, the green light of reason. What does logic suggest? Gather facts. Assess consequences. Second, the yellow light of intuition. How does your body feel about the options? Expansive or tight? Energized or weary? Third, the blue light of stillness. Take a few breaths and notice what remains when both thought and feeling settle. The decision that continues to feel clear in all three lights is usually the one aligned with your deeper sense of coherence. You can use this method for anything from big career changes to small daily choices. Over time, it teaches trust, not blind faith, but confidence in your own integrated awareness. You begin to recognize that intuition and intellect are not rivals. They're collaborators, like two hemispheres of the same brain humming in tune. To live with everyday magic also means setting gentle boundaries for the mysterious. Sometimes you may encounter experiences that feel larger than explanation, a vivid coincidence, a dream that seems prophetic, a sudden wave of empathy for someone far away. These moments can be precious, but they also need care. Before sharing or interpreting them, give them space to breathe. Write them down, let them settle for a day or two. Ask 3 simple questions. Does this experience inspire kindness? Does it expand humility? Does it help me care for the world around me? If the answer is yes, you can keep it as a quiet blessing. If not, let it drift back into the vast sea of mystery. Curiosity without ownership is the safest way to navigate the extraordinary. Community helps too. Find companions who share your interest in reflection and curiosity, but who also keep their feet on the ground. The best conversations about wonder are the ones that end with laughter, not solemnity. A bit of humour is like gravity. It keeps imagination from floating away. The phrase, "without losing your keys," is a reminder that mystical awareness should make life work better, not worse. If a practice makes you kinder, calmer, or more present for others, it's probably leading you in a good direction. One quiet technique for staying rooted is what I call the closing of the circuit. Before bed, take a minute to mentally review the day from morning to night. Recall one thing that puzzled you, one that delighted you, and one that taught you something. Picture them as small lights forming a triangle. Now, with a slow exhale, imagine those lights connecting. Uncertainty, joy, and learning completing a loop. That loop is your circuit of meaning. You don't need to solve or understand the day. You only need to acknowledge that it happened and that you lived it fully. The mind rests when it feels the day has been witnessed. This habit turns even chaotic days into quiet teachers. When you miss a train, spill coffee, or argue with someone you love, you can later look back and ask, what did this moment reveal about how I move through the world? The question doesn't demand guilt, it invites pattern recognition. Each small mishap becomes part of a larger conversation between you and life, a gentle nudge toward awareness. Over time, these practices add up to something profound, a steady sense that the world is participatory, not a machine, but a dialogue. The physicist David Bohm once described reality as unbroken wholeness in flowing movement. You don't need to remember the phrase, just the feeling of it. Every breath you take is exchanged with trees. Every word you speak enters the shared field of sound. Every act of noticing changes what is noticed. That reciprocity is the real everyday magic, and it asks for nothing in return except presence. As the day winds down, you might step outside and look at the sky again. Maybe it's filled with stars, maybe just the faint orange haze of the city. Either way, it's the same sky that watched your ancestors search for meaning, and your descendants will one day inherit. Let that awareness soften your breath. Feel your feet on the ground, your heartbeat steady in your chest. The miracle isn't far away or hidden in other dimensions, it's right here, keeping time with you. From here, our story begins to fold inward toward its quiet center. We've traced how awareness expands through science, through relationship, through the art of noticing. Now we'll return to the heart of it all, the space in which everything arises, the room within all rooms, the sky behind every thought. For tonight, you can close your eyes knowing that you don't need to find magic, you only need to remember you're already inside it. Imagine walking through your house late at night. The lights are dim, the world outside has gone quiet, and every sound, your own footsteps, the hum of the refrigerator, the faint creak of the floor, feels magnified. You move from room to room, maybe checking that the doors are locked, that the stove is off. In each space you find a certain mood, the calm of the living room, the quiet expectancy of the hall, the warmth of the bedroom. Yet all these rooms share one thing that's easy to overlook. They exist within the same house, under the same roof, held by the same night air. That roof, that silence, is what this setting is about. The awareness that holds everything. For the last many chapters, we've explored layers of mind and universe, strings and brains, quantum harmonies, archetypes, intuition, and memory. We've looked at how consciousness might ripple through cells, through families, through time itself. But underneath all these fascinating shapes lies something simpler, the space in which they appear, awareness itself, the room within all rooms. It's easy to think of awareness as just another faculty, like sight or hearing, a function of the brain that switches on when we wake and fades when we sleep. But if you pause for a moment and look inward, you'll notice something subtler. Awareness is not a thing you do. It's the background that allows anything to happen. It doesn't begin or end with thought. When you're lost in a story, then suddenly remember you're reading, what notices that? Awareness. When you wake from a dream and realize it was a dream, what remains unchanged across both worlds? Awareness again. Philosophers from many traditions have tried to describe this mysterious constant. Some call it the witness, others the self, or simply the open sky. All these metaphors point to the same experience, the recognition that what you truly are is not the contents of consciousness, but the capacity for it. Thoughts are clouds, awareness is the sky they drift across. Emotions are waves. Awareness is the ocean that receives them without complaint. In physics, we might call it the field in which everything vibrates. In poetry, the silence that holds every note of the song. The remarkable thing is that you can never step outside of it. Whatever you perceive, awareness is already there. Even confusion is noticed by something clear. Even doubt appears inside something that isn't doubting. Try to find the edge of your awareness and you'll notice it has none. It feels borderless, timeless, like space itself, but softer. That limitless quality can feel both liberating and unsettling, especially when the mind tries to grasp it. But awareness doesn't need to be grasped. It's already what's grasping, already the seeing itself. This understanding isn't about abandoning the world or dissolving individuality. You still have a story, preferences, memories, and plans. The insight simply shifts perspective. You stop identifying exclusively with the wave and begin to sense yourself as the water too. You still move through daily life, answering emails, caring for others, locking the door. But somewhere inside you know that all of it is happening within the same quiet sky. The storm and the calm, the joy and the sorrow are variations of one continuous unfolding. To experience this directly, you don't need special meditation or belief. You can begin right now. Take a slow breath and let your attention rest not on the breath itself, but on the space that allows it. Notice how each inhale appears, lingers, and fades. The same awareness that registers breathing also registers the hum of your environment, the feeling of your body, the passing of thought. All these sensations come and go like visitors entering a house, but the house, the awareness, remains still, welcoming them all. Sometimes people worry that this kind of inner stillness will make them detached or indifferent, as though awareness were cold or distant. But the opposite happens. When you no longer fight your experience, compassion arises naturally. The stillness behind all things feels tender, not aloof. It doesn't reject anger or fear. It holds them like weather passing through air. When you see that, empathy deepens. You realize that everyone, no matter how different their story, is animated by the same light of consciousness. The divisions of race, role, belief, and time soften into a single living fabric. This recognition is what mystics call non-duality, not two. It doesn't mean sameness, it means inseparability. You and the world are not opposites. They are two sides of the same unfolding awareness. Your thoughts shape perception, and perception shapes thought, endlessly mirrored. Every interaction is awareness meeting itself in disguise. When you smile at a stranger and they smile back, awareness has recognized itself briefly, in two forms. When you argue, awareness explores tension within itself, learning balance through contrast. To keep this understanding alive, it helps to use simple reminders, anchors for daily life. You might think of awareness as light streaming through a window. The glass can be dusty or clear, coloured or plain, but the light itself is unchanged. Each moment you pause, breathe and remember, you polish the glass just a little. The light was never gone, you're simply seeing it more clearly. Another image, a lake reflecting the sky. When the surface is still, clouds and mountains appear perfectly. When wind stirs it, the reflection shatters, but the water remains. Your mind is that lake. Awareness is the depth beneath. The trick isn't to freeze the surface, but to remember that its motion doesn't disturb the depth. Even when life feels choppy, the bottom of the lake is calm. This understanding can carry through every corner of life. When work feels stressful, remind yourself, this tension is happening within awareness, not outside it. When joy bursts open, see that it too arises and dissolves inside the same infinite room. Over time, you begin to sense a continuity behind all changes. The ups and downs of existence become like waves on an endless shore, beautiful precisely because they can never be permanent. Many traditions end their teachings here, with quiet gratitude for the simplicity of being. Awareness, after all, asks for nothing. It doesn't demand improvement or proof. It is complete in itself, endlessly present, the one companion that has never left you. You can't lose it, just as a mirror can't lose its ability to reflect. What we call awakening is not gaining something new, but noticing what has always been. As this recognition deepens, a natural gentleness emerges toward the whole of life. You see the same awareness looking back at you through every pair of eyes, through every star, through the stillness of night. Even solitude feels full, because you understand that the vastness within you and the vastness around you are the same space. From here, the story of our journey begins its closing movement. A slow return to the beginning, but with new eyes. We've wandered through physics, psychology, memory, and the quiet experiments of the heart. Now, as we approach the final chapter, we'll gather these threads into one soft fabric, a practical resting place for the mind, a pillow for the cosmos itself. But before we turn that page, pause for a breath. Feel the simplicity of being aware. In this moment, there is nothing missing. The room within all rooms is open, and you are home. The journey we've taken together has been long, though not in miles. It has moved through layers of being, through the outer universe, folded and resonant, through the mind that dreams it, through the quiet spaces where meaning breathes between moments. And now, at the end, all those layers begin to gather back into one gentle point of awareness, like threads returning to a single loom. Take a slow breath. Feel how this simple act has been here all along, unnoticed but faithful. The air enters, expands, and leaves again, like a wave retreating softly from the sand. This breath is not yours alone. It has been shared across centuries, through forests, oceans and countless lives. When you inhale, you're borrowing air from the cosmos. When you exhale, you're giving it back. In that quiet exchange, you can sense the truth we've been circling all along. You belong to everything, and everything belongs to you. Living with that awareness doesn't require grand gestures or endless study. It begins with listening to your body, to your own smallest signals. When something in you expands, it's often a sign that life is moving with ease. When it contracts, perhaps there's a need for gentleness, for waiting, for another perspective. The body's language is older than words, as ancient as tides. Trusting it doesn't mean abandoning reason. It means allowing intuition and thought to walk hand in hand, each one guiding the other toward balance. You can sense this harmony in the simplest choices: what you eat, how you speak, when you rest. Decisions made from wholeness feel quiet inside, as if the air itself agrees. They come not from calculation alone, but from coherence, a resonance between mind, heart, and the wider world. In those moments, you're living the very science we've explored, a being in tune with its own field. Curiosity, too, has its place in this rhythm. To wonder is to keep the world alive. Every question you hold, about the stars, about the mind, about love, is a doorway through which the universe learns itself. But curiosity needs its companion, humility. To look at the unknown with reverence, not ownership. To admit that even the brightest insight is only a candle in an endless night. The miracle is that the night itself is friendly. It allows the candle to shine. When life feels tangled or uncertain, you can return to awareness itself, the room within all rooms. Notice how every sound, every emotion, every thought appears and disappears inside this vast stillness. You don't have to chase peace. Peace is what's left when you stop chasing. Like the sky behind clouds, awareness never argues with the weather. It simply allows it to pass. The more you rest in that allowing, the clearer life becomes. In relationships, this same spaciousness changes everything. When you listen without the urge to fix, when you speak from calm rather than from defense, the field between you and another person shifts. The air softens. Empathy replaces tension. You begin to realize that kindness is not a virtue but a kind of physics, a force that restores equilibrium wherever it's applied. Love, in this sense, is not just emotion. It's the natural gravity of awareness, pulling all things back into connection. Even memory follows this law. The stories carried by your body, your family, and your culture continue to shape you, but awareness gives you the power to edit them with gentleness. You can keep what serves love and release what no longer does. In doing so, you become both the inheritance and the renewal of life, rewriting the script in real time, one breath at a time. And then there is awe, the quiet wonder that turns the ordinary luminous. It doesn't need mountains or thunder. It can live in the sound of rain against glass, in the way morning light touches a cup of water, in the rhythm of your own heartbeat. When you notice such moments, time loosens its grip. You stop reaching for meaning and start receiving it. Every small miracle becomes a reminder that the extraordinary was never hiding. We were simply too busy to see. The practice, then, is simple. Live slowly enough to notice. Breathe deeply enough to feel. Speak softly enough to hear what the silence is saying. Awareness is not separate from the world you move through. It is the world meeting itself in 1,000 forms. Each moment you recognize that, you come home a little more. As night gathers around you now, you can close the circle of this long conversation. Let your thoughts settle like leaves drifting to the bottom of a lake. Whatever questions remain unanswered, let them rest in the stillness that holds them. You don't need to solve the mystery to belong to it. Think of all the places we've travelled tonight, the hidden dimensions of matter, the quantum hum beneath reality, the dreams of the brain, the memories written in our cells, the stories that echo through generations, the quiet field between hearts, the open sky of awareness. None of it has taken you away from yourself. Every turn has been a mirror leading you back here, to this breath, this body, this moment of being. So, as you drift towards sleep, imagine the universe breathing with you. The stars above, the tides below, the pulse within, all moving to the same rhythm. You're not in the universe, you're a shape the universe has taken for a while, a temporary song in an endless symphony. And when the song fades, the silence remains, vast, kind, unbroken. Thank you for walking this path so patiently, for letting curiosity and calm share the same seat beside you. The journey never truly ends, it only deepens into rest. So let it. Let the words blur, the thoughts dissolve, the body soften. There's nothing left to find or fix. Awareness has been here all along, quietly holding everything you've ever loved. Now close your eyes. The cosmos is still humming its lullaby, and somewhere within that sound, so are you. Sleep peacefully, wherever and whenever you may be.